Hey guys, tonight we begin with a world behind silk screens and painted smiles, where beauty, skill and secrets all dance together. It's Japan, long ago, in the hidden quarters where the lanterns glow and the night is alive with whispered stories. The world is delicate, enigmatic, and far more mischievous than it seems by daylight. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft, steady hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've just stepped into a world where the night reveals what the day hides. Imagine this, you're walking through Kyoto, but not the Kyoto of temples swarmed by selfie sticks and tour buses. No, you've slipped, rather ungracefully I might add, through a crack in time. One moment you're scrolling on your phone, the next moment your ankle deep in the soft crunch of gravel streets, and it's the late 1700s. Lanterns sway in the summer night air, each one glowing with a warm belly of flame, casting long shadows on paper walls that whisper when the wind nudges them. And oh yes, your sneakers. Forget them. They've magically been swapped for wooden gaiter sandals, which clack like castanets with every step. You'll curse them in about 5 minutes. The air is thick with the scent of pine smoke and grilled eel wafting from a nearby stall, mingling with something sweeter. Incense curling lazily out of a doorway. Somewhere in the distance, a shamisen string twangs, hesitant at first, then melting into melody. The sound feels like silk brushing the inside of your ear. You know instantly you've wandered into the Hanamashi, the flower towns, where the rules of the outside world blur into dream and theater. Think of it as Vegas, if Vegas required 3 years of training in how to pour tea correctly and recite Waka poetry without smudging your eyeliner. A man brushes past you, his robes whispering like a sigh. He smells faintly of sake and old cedarwood, and you catch the gleam of coins as he disappears into a house whose sliding doors close silently behind him. No sign, no welcome mat, no neon lights flashing, open 24 hours, just a painted crest above the door, discreet as a secret handshake. Behind those doors, entertainment awaits. Not the kind you've seen in movies, not exactly. And certainly not what polite society whispers. Tonight, if you keep following these lantern-lit streets, you'll learn what happens when the guests leave, when the applause dies, when the shamisen strings go quiet. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to get you inside. You shuffle forward, gaiter clacking, and pass a row of houses so perfectly arranged it feels like someone set them up for a diorama. Their paper walls glow faintly from within, shadows flitting across them like brushstrokes come alive. You hear laughter, delicate and precise, the kind of laughter trained to sound as though every syllable sparkles. If you think that's natural, oh no. That laugh is more rehearsed than a Broadway musical. But that's the trick of the geisha, to make art out of the artificial, until it feels more real than life itself. You pause at a corner where 2 lanterns sway, their red paint flaking slightly at the edges. A boy no more than 12 darts by carrying a tray stacked with cups and a small bottle of sake. His robe is loose, his bare feet silent on the ground. He glances at you once, your strange shoes, your stranger face, but then looks away quickly. Foreigners don't exactly belong here, at least not yet. You're lucky he doesn't sound the alarm. The streets bend inward like a maze, a careful design to keep outsiders disoriented. You follow the music, the faint twang of strings, the flutter of laughter. At last you find yourself standing before the entrance of an ochaya, a tea house, though calling it a tea house is like calling the Louvre, a nice picture gallery. Inside, fortunes are spent, secrets are traded, and reputations are carefully crafted over cups of tea that almost no one actually drinks. And here comes your first lesson. A geisha house does not open its doors to just anyone. You don't simply walk in like it's Starbucks and order a grande entertainment with extra foam. No, entry is reserved for men of status, merchants, nobles, wealthy patrons. But tonight, because you're with me, the rules bend. Think of it as a backstage pass to the floating world. The sliding doors part with a sigh. A rush of warm air spills out, scented with sandalwood and sake. Inside, Candlelight flickers across lacquered wood, catching on gold leaf that makes the walls shimmer like they've swallowed the sun. A woman in a soft grey kimono kneels at the threshold, bowing low. She does not look at you directly. That would be improper. But her voice is smooth as she welcomes you. You step inside, and the doors whisper shut behind you, sealing away the outside world. Your feet sink onto tatami mats, springy and fragrant with woven straw. The room feels like it's holding its breath. Then, music. A shamisen, its 3 strings plucked with the crisp precision of raindrops on stone. A drumbeat follows, soft and insistent, like a heart. The music isn't for you. Not really. You are an intruder here. But it washes over you anyway, a sound stitched into the walls themselves. And then you see her. The geisha enters as though she's gliding, though you know those heavy layers of silk weigh more than a small child. Her kimono is a waterfall of indigo, embroidered with silver cranes that seem to ripple with her every movement. Her hair is a lacquered sculpture, pins gleaming like tiny weapons tucked among black rivers of hair. Her face is pale, powdered into porcelain, lips painted a perfect crescent of crimson. She looks like a painting stepped out of its frame. And yet, when she bows, when her eyes lift, just for a flicker, you catch something startling. She sees you. Not the way people glance past you on a crowded street, but truly sees you, as though you've been drawn into the script of her performance. And here's the thing, geisha are not courtesans. They do not sell their bodies. They sell something infinitely more difficult. They sell presence, attention. The illusion that you are the most interesting, most important soul in the room. If you're thinking that sounds exhausting, you'd be right. But here, it looks effortless. She begins to speak, voice a low melody, welcoming the guest she's performing for tonight. Not you. The man across the room, his robes rich, his face flushed with drink. He smiles, leaning in as though her every word is a spell. You watch, unnoticed, a shadow in the corner. This is the show everyone talks about. But what you came for is what happens after. Because when the shamisen strings still, when the laughter fades, when the guests stumble out into the night, the real story begins. What happens when the masks are set down? When geisha are no longer geisha, but women, tired, hungry, mischievous, sometimes heartbroken, sometimes laughing too loudly in the dark. You'll find out soon. For now, though, stay quiet. The night has only just begun, and already there are secrets in the air. You edge closer to the alcove where shadows gather, and for a moment, you feel like a guilty guest at a forbidden party. The low hum of conversation drifts from the inner room, polite laughter, the soft clink of cups, the almost imperceptible rustle of silk against polished floors. The voices are measured, cultivated, careful to hide impatience, exhaustion, or the faintest hint of irritation. Outside, in the daylight, these same women would be weaving through streets with practiced grace, smiling, bowing, offering tea and conversation. Inside, though, behind closed doors, the choreography loosens slightly. A sigh escapes here, a whispered joke there, and you realize you're not supposed to see this. One geisha, a younger one with cheeks like ripe persimmons, tiptoes past carrying a tray of sake cups. She bumps slightly into the doorframe, and you catch the faintest flash of annoyance in her dark eyes, before it vanishes behind a mask of professional composure. If she notices you, she doesn't let on. You take a careful step backward, wishing for a journal, a camera, or some kind of medieval GoPro. None exists, of course, so you settle for memory, the kind that will burn into your brain like incense, smoke twisting through the rafters. There's a moment of quiet, where the only sound is the faint tap of a stick against the wooden floor. It's a warning, or a cue? Hard to tell. Suddenly, one of the older geisha leans over, brushing a sleeve against your shoulder. You nearly jump out of your sandals. She doesn't speak. Instead, she tilts her head, eyes crinkling in amusement. In that instant, you feel the tiniest thread of complicity. Yes, you're watching. Yes, you're out of place, but you are, for a heartbeat, part of this hidden world. The older geisha moves toward a narrow corridor. Her footsteps echo like a secret rhythm, and you follow, barely daring to breathe. Here, the air smells different, faintly of sandalwood, a touch of ink from calligraphy scrolls, and, daringly, a hint of perfume too strong, too floral, almost like it was imported for a client with exotic tastes. The hallway curves, leading you to a side room, its sliding doors slightly ajar. Peering inside, you see what might be a private lesson, a geisha instructing a younger girl in the subtle art of posture. The tilt of the head, the curl of a fan. Each movement is precise, deliberate, rehearsed, and yet the teacher's eyes sparkle with mischief. It hits you then, the double life. By day, all elegance, training, and adherence to centuries-old rules. By night, the same artistry persists, but it's punctuated with laughter that could break glass, whispered secrets that would scandalize anyone from the outer world, and moments of sheer, unguarded humanity. You watch as one girl bursts into quiet giggles, covering her mouth with her sleeve, and a mentor shakes her head, smirking. One day you'll learn to hide it, she murmurs. You step back, trying not to be noticed, but the older geisha's eyes find you again. She leans just slightly forward, enough that her shadow falls across your face, in a conspiratorial whisper, so soft it brushes against your ear like a secret breeze. She says, "Do you want to know what happens after the last guest leaves?" You nod, though your voice is caught somewhere between awe and terror. Her smile is enigmatic, a mix of amusement and warning. "Follow," she says, and slips down the corridor, her kimono brushing the floor. You trail her, careful to step only where the tatami feels firm, avoiding the seams that might squeak. Every step is deliberate, every sound amplified in the quiet of the house. Outside, the world is still alive with lanterns, music, and the occasional shout of a drunken passerby. But here, inside these walls, time has a different rhythm. She leads you into a smaller room, sparsely lit, where the air smells warmer, almost like the inside of a sun-baked wooden box. In the center, a single geisha sits, her kimono loose, hair partly undone. She's writing something in careful kanji, her brush scratching softly against paper. Around her, the room is strewn with personal belongings: a small carved box, a delicate fan, a pair of wooden sandals, a bundle of silk ribbons. This is the private life, the life beyond the audience, the tea, and the clients. The older geisha gestures for you to sit. You do, feeling the straw mat beneath your knees, grounding you in this strange, intimate world. She lowers her voice to a whisper that feels almost sacred. What you see now, you cannot speak of. Not in the streets, not to your friends, not even in your dreams. This is the world after midnight, where geisha are just women, and the city lets them be. You look at the girl writing. She pauses, glances up, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes meet yours. There's a flicker of curiosity, maybe even mischief. Then she laughs softly, a sound like wind through bamboo, and returns to her work. You realize that this laughter, this moment, could never exist in the glare of day, in the judgmental eyes of society. Here, after the guests leave, the rules relax. And yet, not everything is as gentle as it seems. In the shadows, you sense a tension, almost imperceptible. A draft from a slightly open window carries with it a whisper of danger. The older geisha notices your glance and leans close. Even here, even now, you must be careful. Secrets are currency and curiosity can be deadly. Before you can respond, the sliding door creaks. Your heart leaps. A figure appears in the doorway, cloaked in shadow. You catch only a glimpse, a flash of silk, a hint of a face partially obscured by darkness. The older geisha stiffens slightly, her usual calm momentarily flickering. The newcomer moves with purpose, silent as smoke. You feel the room shift, the energy tensing as if the very air knows a secret is approaching. "Who is that?" you whisper, barely audible. The older geisha shakes her head. "Patience. You'll see soon enough. But, whatever happens, do not speak of what you see tonight." You understand. You nod, though a part of you wants to leap up, demand answers, pull back the curtain, and see everything at once. But experience has taught you in this world, immediacy is dangerous. Secrets are precious, and the timing of their reveal is an art, like the brush strokes on the kimono or the cadence of a shamisen note. The newcomer steps fully into the room now, and the candlelight catches a small detail. A tiny emblem pinned to the kimono, something forbidden. Something whispered about in the corridors but never openly discussed. The older geisha's lips press into a thin line, and even the girl writing pauses, her brush suspended in midair. Tension hangs almost palpable, as if the room itself holds its breath. And then, just as quickly as the moment comes, the figure turns toward a side door, motioning silently for the older geisha to follow. You, invisible in the corner, feel a pull of anticipation. What is behind that door? What secrets, what rituals, what forbidden truths lie just beyond the threshold? And why did the mere presence of this person cause a ripple through the calm surface of this midnight world? You swallow hard, your heartbeat echoing louder than the distant shamisen. One step, one word, one miscalculation could shatter the fragile equilibrium you've stumbled into. And yet, you cannot look away, because curiosity, as always, is both your guide and your danger. The older Geisha glances at you once more, a hint of a smile, almost conspiratorial. "Stay here," she whispers. "And watch." You do, frozen in place, senses stretched taut. Outside, the city sleeps under the soft glow of lanterns. Inside, the room is a stage, a theater of secrets, and you are the most forbidden audience member imaginable. And somewhere, just beyond that door, the next act of the floating world is about to begin. The older Geisha slips silently through the side door, and you inch closer, desperate to catch even a shadow of what lies beyond. The room she leaves behind seems suddenly hollow, almost echoing with the absence of her presence. Your ears strain, listening for any clue. An inhale, a whispered name, the shuffle of silk. But the room is still, as though it too knows the rules of discretion. After a moment, curiosity overwhelms caution. You rise onto your toes, leaning forward, and peek through the crack in the sliding door. The corridor beyond is dim, illuminated only by flickering lanterns set in brackets along the walls. The air smells warmer here, a mixture of burning pine, the faint tang of metal from hidden hairpins, and the lingering sweetness of perfumes overused for clients who have long since gone home. Through this narrow hallway, you see more of the private quarters rooms, with paper walls decorated in muted golds and indigos, each door slightly ajar, each revealing snippets of life otherwise hidden. One room shows a young Geisha laughing, tossing a folded fan into the air, catching it expertly. Her teacher watches with a half smile, shaking her head as though to say, "One day, you'll learn the art of controlled joy." The sight is oddly relatable. You think of someone trying to sneak a snack at midnight while their parents are asleep. But here, the stakes are higher, and the elegance is far more precise. Ahead, the older Geisha pauses at a doorway. She whispers a word you do not understand, a code perhaps, and the door slides open silently. Inside, the room is smaller, cozier yet suffused with an energy you cannot name. Candles flicker on low shelves, throwing gentle light across lacquered surfaces, revealing small objects that tell stories, a carved wooden box with intricate cranes, a bundle of folded paper with careful kanji inscriptions, a single hairpin left askew. Each object is a testament to the life lived behind the mask of public performance. She gestures for you to enter, but you hesitate. Even though you've been invited into this secret, stepping fully inside feels like crossing into a sacred space. She notices your hesitation, and, with a soft sigh, encourages you forward. "Curiosity is a blessing and a curse," she murmurs. "Tonight it will be your guide." As you settle on a tatami mat, you notice a faint sound, the click of wooden sandals against floorboards, soft and deliberate. Another figure enters, a Geisha you had not seen before, older, with eyes that gleam like polished onyx. She carries a small bundle, wrapped in silk. The older Geisha greets her with a nod, and the newcomer lays the bundle carefully on the floor, unwrapping it to reveal something you cannot yet discern. The suspense curls in your chest like smoke. The older Geisha glances at you once, eyes sparkling with amusement. "Not everything is for your eyes," she whispers, "but enough to understand why the world outside thinks this is merely entertainment." You glance at the bundle. It's delicate, precious, and terrifyingly intimate. Papers, trinkets, secrets. Your imagination races, painting possibilities that range from the mundane to the scandalous. The air thickens with anticipation. Then, the younger Geisha steps forward, crouching near the bundle, her hands moving with practiced care. She extracts a single object, a hair ornament, lavish and ornate, inlaid with mother of pearl. She studies it briefly, running her fingers over its curves, and then, almost imperceptibly, her expression changes. Something about the way she looks at it, the way her lips press into a thin line, tells you this is not simply a decorative piece. It carries meaning, weight, perhaps even danger. You realize then that this world is layered like a cake, with many secret ingredients. By day, the layers are hidden beneath silk and polish, visible only in performance. By night, The layers are revealed, each more complex than the last. What seems like simple elegance is actually the result of years of training, politics, alliances, and whispered codes. And as you watch, enthralled, you wonder how much of what you're seeing is designed for you, the outsider, and how much is entirely genuine, unguarded, and dangerously true. The older geisha leans toward you again, voice a conspiratorial whisper. You think it's easy to become a geisha, to master art, conversation, music, dance, and the perfect smile, and still you must survive the night. She lets the words hang in the candlelight. You swallow. Survive. You hadn't considered the stakes, until now. The newcomer rises, holding the bundle carefully, and moves to a low table in the center of the room. She begins to lay out its contents, one by one. Delicate scrolls, embroidered potches, and small trinkets, each more intricate than the last. The older geisha points to one and explains in a low voice that these are not mere decorations. They are tools of negotiation, charms for protection, and occasionally, instruments of influence in dealings that must never be seen by clients. You lean forward, fascinated. Each item seems mundane at first glance, but the way they are handled, with reverence, caution, and deliberate ceremony, tells you they are anything but ordinary. A simple hairpin could signal a secret meeting. A folded note, hidden beneath layers of silk, could sway a decision in the delicate political dance of the Hanamachi. You realize that what outsiders see as frivolous ornamentation is actually a lexicon of power. Then, without warning, a loud clack echoes from the hallway. You all freeze. The sound of a gator against polished wood, deliberate, measured. Someone is coming. The tension coils in the room, sharp and immediate. The older geisha motions for you to stay hidden, and you crouch lower, feeling the mat beneath your knees, and the heartbeat in your ears. A figure enters, a man, but not a client. His face is obscured by shadow, his movements precise and silent. He carries nothing overt, but the air shifts in his presence, like a storm waiting to break. The older geisha greets him with a subtle nod, eyes flicking briefly toward the younger geisha, whose hands tighten slightly around a small, folded piece of paper. You realize you're witnessing something that could never be documented in public and exchange. Delicate and dangerous, where the stakes are whispered secrets, influence, and power. This is the geisha after midnight, not the entertainment for tourists, not the polished smiles for wealthy patrons, but the hidden engine that keeps the floating world alive. As the man speaks, his voice low and measured, the younger geisha responds with quiet confidence. Words are exchanged, subtle gestures punctuating the dialogue, each movement laden with significance. You can almost feel the invisible web of alliances, debts, favors, and secrets forming in the room around you. Every glance, every smile, every slight tilt of the head carries meaning you are only beginning to comprehend. The older geisha catches your gaze and raises an eyebrow, as if to say, "Notice that? Everything here is a performance. Even this?" And yet, the truth in the moment is undeniable. The drama, the tension, the whispered negotiations, this is life itself, compressed into a room no larger than a modest apartment. Suddenly, the man's gaze flicks toward you. Or does it? It's impossible to tell. A shiver runs down your spine. You're supposed to be invisible, a shadow among shadows, but for a fleeting second, you feel exposed. And then the moment passes, and he turns back to the younger geisha, continuing the conversation as if you were not there at all. Hours seem to pass in minutes. The candles burn lower, throwing dancing shadows across walls adorned with lacquer and gold leaf. You realize you have been holding your breath, and when you finally exhale, the sound feels loud in the quiet room. The older geisha watches you with a faint smile, as though acknowledging your endurance. "Few outsiders can sit here and remain silent," she whispers. "Fewer still can truly understand what happens in these hours." And then, just as you begin to think the night's secrets might remain shrouded in subtlety and shadows, the door at the far end of the room slides open once more. A new figure steps inside, someone whose presence shifts the entire energy of the room. The air thickens, the candles flicker, and even the shadows seem to pause. You lean forward instinctively, heart racing. Who is this newcomer? What secret have they brought with them? And more importantly, how much of what you are about to see will you survive as a witness? The older geisha's voice, calm but tinged with warning, breaks the spell. Now, you will see why curiosity can be both a gift and a curse. And with that, the room holds its breath, the night tightens its grip, and you realize you are on the very edge of a story that no outsider has ever truly witnessed. The door slides open, slow and deliberate, like a knife through silk, and a new figure steps inside. Your pulse kicks up a notch. The room, already dense with candlelight and whispered tension, seems to lean closer, as if it too wants to witness what's about to unfold. You squint, trying to catch the newcomer's features. A shadowed face, but not entirely hidden. There's an elegance to their movements, a quiet authority that demands attention without uttering a word. The older Geisha rises subtly, bowing just enough to acknowledge the arrival. The younger Geisha straightens, hands slightly trembling as if even her trained composure cannot entirely mask anticipation. The stranger places a small package on the low table, wrapped meticulously in black silk. Your curiosity gnaws at you, a quiet hunger you've learned to suppress in the first hour, but now it's impossible. What could this contain that shifts the energy of an entire room? The older Geisha leans toward you, voice low and conspiratorial. This, she murmurs, is the essence of what the floating world conceals from day and light. You are about to witness a ritual few outsiders survive intact. In understanding, if not in memory, you swallow hard, suddenly hyper, aware of every scent. The sweet tang of incense curling in lazy spirals, the subtle metallic edge of candle wax melting into lacquered trays, the faint, human perfume that lingers in the corners of the room. The air feels alive, pulsing with expectation. The newcomer unwraps the black silk slowly, almost ceremoniously. Inside lies a small set of folded papers, each meticulously stamped with symbols you don't recognize. Your first thought, secret instructions, coded messages perhaps. But your second thought, which comes a heartbeat later, is darker. These could be debts, favors, promises, or warnings. You glance at the older Geisha, and she gives nothing away, an impassive mask with just a hint of a smirk, as if daring you to guess and fail. The younger Geisha reaches for one of the papers, unfolding it with care. Her fingers tremble slightly, betraying the gravity of what she's reading. The stranger watches her with an intensity that makes the air feel heavier. The candle flames lean closer in curiosity, and even the shadows seem to stretch as if they want to absorb every nuance. And then, the unthinkable. The younger Geisha exhales sharply, a sound that punctures the quiet. This cannot be true, she murmurs. Her words are almost lost beneath the soft tap of Gita from the corridor. But they resonate in your chest. Something forbidden is unfolding here, something even the most seasoned insiders rarely encounter. The older Geisha's eyes meet yours for a moment, calm but steely. Sometimes, she says softly, you will see things that shake the very foundation of the world you thought you understood. And other times, they will shake the world you carry inside you. A pause. A breath. Then the younger Geisha carefully lays the paper back on the table, bowing slightly to the newcomer. A brief exchange of glances, subtle, coded, almost invisible, passes between them. You catch only fragments of meaning, a warning, a reminder, a question. But it is enough to tell you that the balance of power in this room is shifting. You, a silent observer, are perched at the precipice of revelation. The older Geisha gestures toward you. Observe closely. Learn. But do not interfere. You are a shadow here. A shadow sees, but it does not touch. Do you understand? Yes. You whisper, even though your mind is buzzing. Every instinct screams that you should speak, ask questions, pry further. But you obey. Shadows, you now realize, survive longer than voices. The stranger finally speaks, and the sound is like a pebble dropped into still water, soft, deliberate, unsettling. Tonight, they say, we resolve what has lingered in silence too long. The words are simple, but the weight behind them presses into your chest. Something monumental, something dangerous, is about to unfold. You lean forward, absorbing every flicker of expression, every subtle gesture. The younger Geisha passes a small cup to the stranger, filled with a clear liquid that glints like liquid moonlight. They sip carefully, eyes never leaving the older Geisha, and then, a ripple, a tension, a shift so subtle you almost doubt it occurred. Yet it did. The room has changed. The air itself is different, tighter, heavier, charged with a quiet, almost sacred electricity. Outside, the streets of Kyoto continue their nightly symphony. Distant laughter, the shuffle of feet, the occasional shout of a drunk passing by. But inside the world has contracted to this single room. Every glance, every whispered syllable, every careful motion matters. You are immersed, teetering on the edge of comprehension, acutely aware that one wrong breath could expose you, or worse, disrupt the delicate equilibrium these women have maintained for decades. The older geisha leans close again, voice soft, conspiratorial teasing. Do you feel it? The pulse of the night. This is what outsiders never see. They see the dances, the music, the tea ceremonies, but not this. This is what keeps the floating world alive. And you do feel it. The rhythm, subtle yet undeniable, coursing through the room like the quiet heartbeat of a city that exists only after midnight. It is dangerous, intoxicating, and mesmerizing all at once. The younger geisha spreads the papers across the low table, like a meticulous artist laying out her palette. Each piece is a delicate scroll or folded note, stamped with symbols that could pass for abstract art to an outsider. But you know better now, every mark is a story, a command, a secret favor, or a warning, something that could ruin a reputation or tip the balance of influence in the Hanamashi. You lean in slightly. Though you know better, curiosity is a dangerous companion. The stranger begins pointing at various symbols with a lacquered finger, and the room leans in collectively. The older geisha whispers explanations only to the younger women, her voice soft and knowing, like a professor lecturing under dim candlelight. This mark signals the completion of a debt owed. That one is a warning, never ignore it. And here, she taps a scroll delicately, as the note that decides a career or ends one. You imagine modern office politics amplified tenfold, with stakes measured not in quarterly bonuses, but in honor, livelihood, and survival. It's like watching a high-stakes corporate negotiation, except everyone is wearing silk, performing subtle dances, and sipping tea like liquid calm, while the fate of careers hangs in the balance. You almost laugh at the absurdity, almost until the intensity in the room reminds you this is no joke. Then, the younger geisha carefully rolls one scroll and slides it toward the newcomer. The stranger's eyes flick to it, expression unreadable, and for a moment, the room is perfectly still. Even your own breathing seems loud. You feel like a character in a spy novel, except the spies wear kimonos and wield elegance instead of guns. The older geisha leans closer to you. What you see here, she murmurs, voice barely above the candle flicker, is what keeps the floating world functioning when the clients leave. Influence is subtle. Power is measured in gestures, glances, and whispers. It's invisible to the untrained eye, but it rules everything. And as she speaks, you understand these papers, this ritual, this midnight world, it's all an ecosystem. Every movement, every decision is deliberate, calculated, rehearsed, yet alive. Outsiders think of geisha as entertainers. But after midnight, you realize they are architects of survival, wielders of influence, and custodians of secrets that could topple lives with a single misstep. A faint laugh breaks the tension. The younger geisha, finally allowed a private breath, tilts her head, smirks, and whispers something to the older geisha. It's subtle, playful, almost humanizing. Humor is allowed here, but only in brief, precious moments, like an oasis in a desert of calculated poise. And you, shadowed observer, feel privileged and slightly guilty to witness such moments. Then the stranger rises, moving closer to a low chest in the corner. The room collectively leans in, eyes following. They extract a small wooden box, plain except for a carved insignia that hints at lineage, authority, or perhaps danger. The older geisha eyes it carefully, her expression shifting ever so slightly. You notice it immediately. This box carries weight, literally and figuratively, that the candles themselves seem to acknowledge. The stranger places it on the table with deliberate care. The younger geisha kneels, opening it to reveal a collection of objects, small brushes, carved seals, silk cords, and one object that makes you catch your breath. It's a hair ornament, unlike any you've seen, inlaid with mother of pearl and jade, delicate yet commanding. Your modern brain flashes Tiffany meets secret intelligence agency, except infinitely more elegant and deadly in subtle ways. Watch, the older geisha instructs quietly. Every move matters. The younger geisha takes the ornament, handling it as if it were alive. She lifts it slowly, positions it on her own hair, then carefully removes it, tracing invisible patterns in the air before setting it back down. The stranger nods in approval, and then unexpectedly, the younger geisha passes it to you. You nearly choke. Me. The older geisha's lips twitch, hinting at humor. For observation, not adornment, she corrects. Touch it carefully. Feel it. Understand its purpose. You obey, lifting it delicately. The craftsmanship is astonishing. The jade is cool, almost electric under your fingers, the mother of pearl iridescent in candlelight. And suddenly, the room shifts again. The energy intensifies, and you sense that this object is not merely decorative. It carries a story, a threat, a promise. Chapter 2 Part 3. The stranger speaks again, voice low, deliberate, echoing softly against lacquered walls. This ornament, they say, decides the path of a life, not the outside world. This house, these women, this floating world. The older geisha's eyes flick to yours briefly, a silent warning. Listen carefully. Every word, every gesture matters. The younger geisha carefully returns the ornament to its place in the box. Then she unfolds another scroll, revealing instructions for a ceremony you do not fully understand. It's precise, intricate, and beautiful, a choreography of ritual and power. Even the candle flames seem to lean closer in curiosity, flickering in tandem with the movements being described. As the ceremony begins, you notice the smallest details: the tilt of a head, the flick of a wrist, the alignment of toes with the tammy mats. It's a dance, a performance, and yet it is also serious, weighted, with consequences invisible to the untrained eye. One misstep could unravel a career, a reputation, or a network of secrets maintained with generations of precision. The stranger steps back, observing, hands folded, eyes narrow. The older geisha whispers to the younger one, guiding her, correcting imperceptibly. And you realize this is training, yes, but it's also politics, negotiation, and survival all rolled into one delicate, dangerous bullet. For a moment, the room relaxes just slightly. A whispered laugh, a brief shared glance, a small smile. You allow yourself to breathe, feeling a strange kinship with these women, strangers yet intimately alive in a world invisible to everyone else. And then, the sound of footsteps outside, different this time, sharp, deliberate, and entirely uninvited. The candle flames dance violently as the door creaks open. Another figure slips in, this one carrying a sealed letter, the wax crest unmistakable. The room goes still, eyes lock, breaths are held. You feel your own pulse echo like a drum in the quiet. The older geisha's lips press into a thin line. It begins again, she murmurs. The cycle of influence, secrecy, and survival never truly stops. The stranger approaches the new arrival, exchanging a brief, tense word. The younger geisha watches with barely contained attention, and in the air between them hangs an unspoken question. What has been brought tonight that could shift the fragile balance of the floating world? You lean forward, straining to see, but the older geisha lays a gentle hand on your shoulder. Patience, she whispers. Some things are revealed only in time, and some you may never fully understand. And as you sit there, shadowed in candlelight, absorbing every delicate movement, every whispered syllable, every subtle gesture of power and trust, you realize one thing with absolute clarity. The floating world is far more dangerous, intricate, and mesmerizing than you ever imagined. And tonight, you are in its center. The door closes slowly behind the newcomer, leaving only candlelight, shadow, and secrets. And as the room exhales collectively, you can't help but wonder. What will happen when the final piece of this midnight puzzle is revealed? And will you even survive to see it? The door closes with a soft click behind the newcomer. And suddenly the room feels smaller, more intimate, as if the walls themselves are leaning in to hear what happens next. Candlelight flickers across lacquered surfaces, casting shadows that twist like curious spirits. You sit on your tatami mat, knees pressed lightly together, heart still thudding from the tension in the previous chapter, wondering if your pulse is too loud. The stranger, the one who first brought the black silk bundle, steps toward the table. The wax-sealed letter is delicately placed before them, its crimson seal catching the candlelight like a tiny, forbidden sun. The air smells faintly of pine ink and something richer, perhaps the perfume lingering from a client long gone. You inhale slowly, realizing that scent alone carries stories in this house. Each subtle note is a whisper of history, a reminder that geisha live in senses as much as in ceremonies. The older geisha leans toward you, voice low, conspiratorial. This, she murmurs, where personal and political collide. Every move, every glance, every gesture carries weight. A misstep can ripple through the Hanamachi, unseen yet destructive. You glance at the letter, wanting desperately to peek at its contents, but instinct and fear hold you back. In this world, knowledge without permission is dangerous. Your role is observer, shadow witness, but never participant. The newcomer breaks the seal with practiced ease, the wax snapping like a whisper of danger. They unfold the letter slowly, their eyes scanning the contents, lips moving silently in recognition or calculation. And then, they place it on the table, carefully, deliberately, as though it were a living thing. The younger geisha leans in, hands folded in a perfect rectangle of composure, yet you notice the tension in her shoulders. The older geisha watches her quietly, correcting nothing, allowing the moment to teach itself. You realize that every movement in this room is instruction. The way they handle paper, the tilt of the head, the alignment of kimono sleeves, all of it speaks volumes. The stranger speaks finally, voice low and precise. This letter changes everything, or your stomach twists, changes everything. You glance at the older geisha, seeking reassurance, but find only a faint smile, almost teasing, almost warning. Curiosity, she whispers, will carry you far. But remember, it can also destroy. And then you understand tonight. Nothing is as simple as tea, laughter, or music. Every object, every note, every whispered instruction is a thread in a delicate web that binds these women. This household, and the floating world itself. The younger geisha delicately unfolds another document. This one smaller, stamped with symbols you don't recognize. She traces the ink with her fingertips, careful not to smudge the characters, her brow furrowing slightly. This could not have been intended for us, she murmurs, voice trembling. The stranger nods, expression unreadable, and for a moment, the room holds its breath. The older geisha leans toward you again, eyes glittering in the candlelight. Watch carefully, she says, because this is a lesson outsiders rarely get. Power is subtle, influence invisible, and secrets are both weapon and shield. You nod, unable to tear your eyes away. Outside, the streets of Kyoto hum with life, the lanterns swaying gently, distant voices carrying across the night. But inside this room, time has a different rhythm, deliberate, careful, intimate, dangerous. And you are perched at the center of it all, invisible yet fully present. The stranger begins to rearrange the papers on the table, creating a visual map of connections, debts, favors, and warnings. It is like watching a master chess player set a board for moves only they can see. The older geisha murmurs softly explanations, her voice weaving history into strategy, showing how these invisible networks maintain the floating world. You almost laugh at the thought that outsiders think geisha are entertainers. No, you realize now, they are strategists, diplomats, and archivists of secrets. A subtle noise draws your attention, a soft shuffle behind a screen. You catch a glimpse of movement. Another shadow entering the room, this one slight, almost hesitant. The older geisha notices it instantly and raises an eyebrow. "Ah," she whispers, almost to herself. The night is full of surprises. The newcomer who arrived earlier steps closer to the screen, revealing a young apprentice geisha, barely more than a girl, clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Her eyes are wide, alert, and uncertain. You feel an almost painful surge of empathy. She is here to witness, to learn, to navigate a world that is dazzling, dangerous, and secretive, all at once. The older geisha gestures subtly, guiding the apprentice forward. "Observe," she says softly. "Learn. Every gesture, every word, every pause teaches a lesson you will carry for life." And you do observe, entranced. The apprentice kneels beside the older geisha, unwrapping the bundle to reveal more delicate instruments, small brushes, carved stamps, tiny cords, and another hair ornament, simpler yet equally significant. Each object is a node in a vast network of rituals and secrets. You notice how careful the hands are, how every motion is deliberate, almost like a dance, and you realize that these nightly rituals are both performance and survival. A combination of artistry, politics, and strategy you could never have imagined. Then, unexpectedly, the stranger places one of the smaller scrolls in your hands. Your eyes widen. "My," you whisper. The older geisha smiles faintly. Observation requires participation, in the smallest ways. Handle it with care, and watch what unfolds. You do, tracing the delicate characters, feeling the weight of centuries in the fibers of the paper. The moment is intimate, almost sacred. Outside, the city continues its oblivious hum, unaware that the fate of reputations, alliances, and secrets lies in the hands of the women. And you, a silent shadow, caught in the web. As you study the scroll, the younger geisha begins a ritual, arranging objects and papers with precise movements. Candle flames dance across her hands, flickering over the inlaid ornaments, casting shadows that resemble living creatures on the walls. The older geisha whispers instructions to the apprentice, guiding her, correcting posture and gesture, but leaving space for interpretation, for instinct. The newcomer observes silently, occasionally nodding, occasionally tapping a scroll, signaling subtle approvals or warnings. Every action is loaded with significance, and you realize that understanding this world requires patience, attention, and humility. A slip, a misplaced glance, even a breath in the wrong rhythm, could disrupt the fragile equilibrium. The younger geisha lifts a delicate brush and traces ink along the edge of a folded note. The room grows quieter, if possible, as the sound of bristles against paper fills the space. You think of modern offices with the clack of keyboards, the drone of fluorescent lights, and suddenly the contrast is stark here. Power is silent, elegant, invisible, yet palpable. The older geisha leans close, voice low and conspiratorial. What you are seeing is how influence is woven. Not shouted, not forced, threaded like a kimono's silk, layer upon layer. One mistake, one misstep, and the weave unravels. You glance at the stranger, whose eyes now flicker with subtle calculation. They step forward, touching a stamp lightly to one of the scrolls, pressing just enough to leave a mark, a signal. The younger geisha follows suit, her hands trembling ever so slightly. You feel the tension coil in the room like a living thing. And then, a whisper from the apprentice, barely audible, yet clear in its uncertainty. What if it's wrong? The older geisha places a hand on the girl's shoulder, steadying her, grounding her. Then we adjust, she says softly, but never publicly. In this world, mistakes are invisible until they explode. A faint shiver runs through you. Mistakes invisible until they explode. You think of modern life, the minor missteps magnified, public shaming, viral disasters. But here the consequences are measured differently, subtle, devastating, and nearly impossible to repair if mishandled. The stranger nods to the older geisha. A brief exchange of silent glances, subtle movements, and then the room shifts. Objects are repositioned, scrolls stacked differently, and you realize the ritual has begun. Every woman participates, yet no one acts alone. The choreography is invisible to outsiders but precise, elegant, and essential. You lean forward instinctively, heart hammering, aware that what you witness now will stay with you long after the night ends. Outside, the city sleeps, but inside, the midnight world pulses, alive with history, power and secrets. And then suddenly a soft creak, the floorboards near the far wall. A shadow moves. You freeze. The newcomer's head turns slightly. The older geisha's expression tightens, just for a heartbeat, and the younger geisha catches it. The room is still again, as if the walls themselves hold their breath. You sense it immediately. The night has not yet revealed all of its secrets. Someone, or something, has entered the periphery of this hidden world. And you, a silent observer, are about to witness a moment that could change everything. The shadow moves again, closer this time, and your stomach twists. You realize that despite your best efforts to remain unseen, the presence of someone, or something, else in this room has shifted the entire rhythm. Candle flames flicker nervously, almost as if acknowledging the new arrival. The older geisha's eyes narrow, every muscle in her body alert but controlled, like a cat poised to pounce yet perfectly composed. The newcomer steps forward, different from the first stranger. This one carries no bundle, no sealed letter, yet their aura commands attention. You notice the subtle sway of their kimono, the quiet strength in each step, the faint scent of camellia oil mingling with incense. Even in shadow, you sense authority. The older geisha inclines her head slightly, a gesture that blends respect, caution, and recognition of danger. The younger geisha stiffens, hands brushing the edge of a folded scroll. The apprentice's eyes widen, reflecting fear and awe. And you, a silent shadow in the corner, realize This is a person whose presence could upend the careful balance maintained in this house for generations. The stranger speaks, voice low, almost melodic, carrying weight in every syllable. "I bring a message," they say. The older Geisha inclines her head again. "We have been expecting it," she replies, though her tone is measured, as though every word is weighed against invisible scales. The figure hands over a sealed envelope, crimson wax catching the candlelight. The younger Geisha takes it with trembling fingers, eyes flicking to the older woman for guidance. You sense that whatever is inside will ripple through the floating world like a pebble dropped into still water. Secrets, alliances, debts, favors, all poised to collide in ways you cannot yet imagine. The stranger bows slightly, then retreats, as silently as they appeared. You catch only a glimpse of their face, sharp, unreadable, almost sculpted in candlelight, and then they vanish into the night. The room exhales collectively, the tension lingering like a physical presence. The older Geisha takes the envelope and places it carefully on the table, opening it with deliberate precision. The contents are simple at first glance, a few pages of delicate paper, inked symbols that could pass for calligraphy to an outsider. But you know better. Each symbol, each line is a directive, a command, a whisper of power. The air vibrates with the weight of meaning. The younger Geisha leans forward, tracing the characters with her fingertips. "It is precise," she murmurs, "and dangerous." The older Geisha nods, eyes never leaving the inked words. "Danger is the foundation of this world," she replies. "Without it, these rituals, these secrets, they would not matter." You notice the apprentice shifting slightly, her fingers fidgeting with a small cord. The older Geisha observes silently, waiting for the moment when instruction is necessary. And then, almost imperceptibly, she whispers, "Patience." Observation is a lesson, sometimes more powerful than action. As the younger Geisha reads, the candles flicker again, shadows twisting like curious spirits on lacquered walls. You feel the subtle tension coil tighter in your chest, aware that you are witnessing not just ritual, but the delicate navigation of power, influence, and survival. And in that realization, your pulse matches the quiet rhythm of the floating world itself. A sudden noise startles you, the soft shuffle of silk against floorboards. All eyes turn subtly toward the sound. The apprentice freezes, and you realize this could be a test, or perhaps an intrusion. The older Geisha's hand hovers near a scroll, prepared to intervene if necessary. The newcomer who brought the letter has already left, yet their presence lingers like a shadow, a silent reminder of the precarious balance maintained within these walls. The younger Geisha carefully refolds the pages, placing them in precise alignment on the table. Each movement, deliberate and almost ceremonial, seems to assert control over a world that is simultaneously delicate and dangerous. The older Geisha nods approvingly, and the apprentice exhales, a quiet sound you almost miss, yet it carries a world of relief, fear, and burgeoning understanding. And just as you begin to think the night might settle, another sound pierces the room, the soft click of a hairpin dropped onto the tatami. The air stiffens. All movement halts. You realize that even the smallest accident could carry consequences, and in this house, silence speaks as loudly as any whisper. The older Geisha leans toward the younger one and the apprentice, voice calm but tinged with urgency. "Everything you have witnessed tonight is only a fraction of what the floating world demands. Precision, discretion, and understanding, these are your armor." The younger Geisha nods, eyes flicking to the refolded scrolls. "I understand," she whispers, though you can see the tension still lingers. The apprentice mimics her, hands folded in quiet obedience, though you notice the rapid heartbeat reflected in her neck, the slight tremor in her fingers. The older Geisha turns toward you, eyes glittering in candlelight, and speaks softly, conspiratorially. "You see this world through shadows and light. Remember it. Every glance, every gesture, every pause carries meaning. You are a shadow here. Observe, but do not intervene. It is the only way to survive." You nod, acutely aware of the weight of her words. The candlelight dances across the lacquered objects. The delicate ornaments, the folded scrolls, and the unseen threads connecting every participant. Outside, the night continues, but inside, time feels suspended. A world contained within walls of paper, silk, and whispered secrets. The younger Geisha finally rises, placing each object and scroll back into their proper place. The ritual for now concludes. Candles burn lower, shadows stretch and twist, and the room exhales a subtle, collective release of tension. You sense the temporary calm, knowing it is only a pause, a breath before the next ripple of secrets unfolds. The older geisha addresses you again. Tonight, you have witnessed power, discretion, and subtle influence. But the night is not done. There are lessons you will carry, and some you may never fully understand. You glance at the folded scrolls, the delicate ornaments, the shadowed faces, and realize this is only the beginning. The floating world thrives in darkness, in secrecy, in moments invisible to outsiders. And you, a silent observer, are perched at the edge of revelation, unable to turn back. A faint noise at the sliding door breaks the reverie. Someone approaches. You feel the tension coil again, sharper this time, aware that whatever comes next could change everything. Candle flames flicker in anticipation, shadows stretch eagerly, and the room prepares to absorb yet another secret into its careful, fragile ecosystem. The older geisha's voice cuts through the quiet, calm yet commanding. And now, we see who is truly ready to understand. The door slides open. A figure steps in, tall, confident, carrying an aura that seems to bend the light around them. You catch a glimpse of eyes sharp and knowing, mouth set in a line that promises both intrigue and danger. The newcomer's presence shifts the room, the energy, the rhythm. Your pulse hammers. You realize you are on the edge of discovery, the precipice of a secret deeper than any before. And the question that grips you, chilling and thrilling in equal measure, is simple and terrifying. Will you survive what you are about to witness next? The sliding door clicks shut behind the latest newcomer, and for a heartbeat, the room holds its collective breath. Candle flames quiver like tiny, anxious dancers. Shadows stretch across tatami mats, curling around lacquered trays and delicate ornaments, as if trying to eavesdrop on the night's unfolding drama. You feel your pulse synchronize with the room's quiet intensity, realizing you are no longer a mere observer. You are a witness to something rare, something almost sacred. The older geisha leans slightly toward you, voice conspiratorial, a teasing lilt to her tone. See, this is the moment when the floating world flexes its muscles. And by muscles, I mean invisible ones. The kind that decide careers, alliances, and, occasionally, who gets a really good cup of tea. You almost laugh, but it would be inappropriate here. The tension in the room is palpable, sharp as the edge of a finely carved hairpin. The younger geisha and the apprentice kneel beside the low table, eyes flicking between the newcomers and the delicate objects. The folded scrolls, the hair ornaments, the tiny brushes that carry the weight of centuries. The newcomer places a small, lacquered box on the table. No ceremony, no announcement, just a quiet, deliberate act that shifts the room's energy, like a stone dropped into still water. The older geisha's eyes narrow slightly, recognizing the significance immediately. You lean in, heart hammering, trying to catch a glimpse of what lies inside. The younger geisha unwraps the box carefully, revealing a set of instruments, brushes, seals, cords, and one small object that makes you inhale sharply. It is a delicate mirror, its surface slightly curved, the edge inlaid with mother of pearl. In this world, you realize mirrors are never just mirrors. They reflect power, reputation, and intentions. A slip in how one is handled, and the consequences can be far-reaching. The newcomer speaks, voice low, almost hypnotic. Tonight, alliances will be tested, secrets revealed, and loyalties measured. The older geisha inclines her head slightly, acknowledging the weight of these words without comment. The younger geisha's hands tremble, ever so slightly as she adjusts the mirror, aligning it with the candlelight, so that its reflection is perfect. You notice the apprentice shifting nervously, aware that she is on the edge of something that could either teach her or terrify her into paralysis. You feel a pang of sympathy. The first nights in the floating world are never easy, and observation is as much a test as participation. The older geisha leans closer to you, whispering as if sharing a forbidden secret. Watch closely. The floating world is a delicate ecosystem. Each glance, each gesture, each carefully chosen word can tip the balance. What you see as performance is actually negotiation, survival, and diplomacy all at once. You nod, barely breathing, acutely aware of the fragile tension that wraps the room like a silk cocoon. The stranger who entered before the newcomer begins to manipulate the scrolls, aligning symbols and markings with subtle precision. You realize that this is not random, not improvisational. It is strategy written in ink, interpreted by subtle gestures, and enacted with poise and absolute control. The candlelight flickers again, shadows dancing like restless spirits on lacquered surfaces. You smell the faint hint of camellia oil, mixed with candle wax paper, and the lingering perfume of the geisha themselves. Every scent carries meaning here, social cues, hierarchy, even warnings. You wonder if the modern world has any understanding of how literally every sense is engaged in this secret ecosystem. Then, the newcomer leans forward, placing a small scroll in front of the younger geisha. She hesitates, glances at the older geisha, then opens it with care. The inked characters are precise, unfamiliar, and immediately commanding. You catch a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a mix of dread, understanding, and excitement. The older geisha tilts her head, a faint smile curving her lips. The dance begins in earnest, she murmurs. Notice how the young one reacts. That hesitation, that flicker of comprehension, that is her first negotiation of power. Observe, but do not interfere. The apprentice watches as well, her small hands folded in polite stillness, but you notice the way her fingers twitch, how her eyes track every movement, every shift of expression. She is learning, absorbing, memorizing. The room itself seems to lean into her presence, teaching her in the subtlest of ways. A soft creak from the far corner makes everyone pause. You notice it immediately. The floorboards betray a new presence. Candle flames stretch toward the sound, shadows lengthen, and the older geisha's eyes flick toward the noise. You realize instantly that the night is far from over. There is always one more secret waiting, one more test, one more revelation. The shadowed figure steps into the room, silent, graceful, eyes sharp and knowing. You catch only a glimpse of their expression, half curiosity, half warning, but it is enough to make the room shift, energy crackling in the air. The older geisha exhales softly, a controlled sound, and whispers, almost to herself, so it begins. The newcomer kneels at the low table, placing a series of folded papers in a deliberate pattern. The younger geisha and the apprentice watch, following each movement with exacting attention. You realize the pattern is like a map, a web of influence, favor, and secrecy. A single misplaced fold could unravel years of careful negotiation. The older geisha observes silently, her expression unreadable, though her eyes glint with amusement, or perhaps approval. She leans toward you, voice low, conspiratorial. Notice how every movement carries meaning. Outside, people fight loudly, dramatically, often recklessly. Here the war is silent, elegant, and far more dangerous. You nod, eyes flicking to the scrolls, the mirror, the delicate instruments. Candlelight catches the mother of pearl in the mirror, reflecting subtle patterns onto the walls, creating a shimmering network of light and shadow. You realize it is almost like watching a living diagram of influence. The newcomer lifts one scroll and taps it lightly, signaling the younger geisha to respond. She adjusts the placement of a tiny brush, aligning it perfectly with the markings. A quiet nod from the stranger, and the apprentice imitates, placing a chord just so. You notice the almost imperceptible tension in the air, the kind that hints at centuries of ritual, history, and expectation all compressed into one delicate moment. The older geisha smiles faintly, leaning closer. Observe the subtle negotiations. The floating world operates on gestures, glances, and carefully measured words. One misstep, even unseen, can change everything. Think of it as diplomacy with stakes measured in elegance and survival, not money. The room is silent except for the faint scratching of ink and the soft shuffle of silk against tatami. You notice the newcomer's eyes flick to the older geisha, a silent question passing between them. The older woman responds with a barely perceptible tilt of her head. This exchange is like a conversation in an unknown language. Silent, subtle, precise, and you are straining to understand every nuance. The apprentice inhales sharply, fingers clutching the edge of her kimono. The older geisha reaches out, guiding her hand in the subtlest possible way. Patience, she whispers. Everything is revealed in time. You will learn to move within the shadows without disturbing them. And you understand in this world, observation is power. Even as a silent outsider, you are learning the rules, the rhythm, the subtleties that govern life after midnight in the floating world. Then, the softest of sounds, a bell, perhaps, or a bead rolling across lacquered floor, breaks the tension. All eyes flick toward it. The candles lean as if trying to see, shadows stretch expectantly. The newcomer's lips curve slightly, a silent acknowledgement of what is coming. The older geisha exhales, eyes narrowing. And now, the final lesson for the night. She murmurs, almost as if speaking to herself. The world of influence never sleeps, and neither can those who inhabit it. You feel a shiver run down your spine. Outside, Kyoto hums quietly, lanterns swinging gently in the night breeze. Inside, the floating world pulses with life, secrets, and unspoken threats. You realize, with a mixture of awe and fear, that you are not just witnessing history, you are living it. The newcomer leans closer to the younger geisha, whispering something that makes her flinch and then bow slightly. You catch only fragments. If misread, consequences, never undone. The older geisha nods, approving the silent warning, and you, shadowed observer, feel the gravity of the moment. Every gesture, every glance, every carefully placed object carries the weight of centuries. And as you watch the interplay of ritual, secrecy, and subtle power, you understand one thing clearly. In the floating world, the night never truly ends, and secrets are the currency by which survival is measured. A sudden creak near the entrance draws your gaze. The room stiffens. Candle flames flicker violently. Shadows stretch like living things. And you realize, with a chill that curls through your chest, that yet another revelation, another test, is about to unfold. The creak repeats louder this time, drawing every eye toward the sliding door. Candle flames quiver, casting elongated shadows that flicker across lacquered trays, and the delicate instruments scattered on the low table. You hold your breath, heart hammering. The air feels suddenly heavier, as if the room itself is bracing for the presence of yet another intruder, or perhaps a revelation long anticipated. The door slides open, slow and deliberate. A figure steps into the room, their kimono patterned in muted tones that shimmer subtly in the candlelight. There is an unmistakable authority in their stance, a confidence that borders on intimidation, yet is tempered by elegance. The older geisha inclines her head slightly, acknowledging their presence without a word, the gesture a mixture of respect, caution, and understanding. You notice the younger geisha stiffen, hands brushing the edge of a scroll as if for protection. The apprentice's eyes widen, reflecting a mixture of awe, fear, and the kind of intense curiosity that can only come from standing on the threshold of knowledge too complex for a beginner's mind. The newcomer speaks, voice low and measured, resonant in a way that seems to carry weight beyond the walls of the room. The balance is shifting. They say, placing a small, lacquered box on the table. Every movement is deliberate, precise, as though even a misstep could tip the invisible scales governing this nocturnal ecosystem. The older geisha leans toward the younger geisha and the apprentice, her voice a whisper, conspiratorial yet filled with authority. Observe closely. What you see here is the convergence of influence, power, and subtle negotiation. Every gesture matters, every pause has meaning, and every glance is a declaration. The newcomer opens the lacquered box, revealing a collection of objects, tiny brushes, cords, folded scrolls, and a hair ornament unlike any you've seen before. The mother of pearl inlaid in jade catches the candlelight, sending ripples of reflected patterns across the tatami mats. The object seems alive, almost sentient, as if it senses its surroundings and the tension in the room. The younger geisha reaches for it with trembling hands, lifting it with reverence. You feel your own fingers itch to touch it, but you know better. In this world, touching without permission is tantamount to sacrilege. She positions it carefully in her hair, adjusts a cord, and removes it again, as if performing a silent ritual that speaks volumes about hierarchy, loyalty, and personal skill. The stranger nods approvingly, and the older geisha murmurs a comment so quiet, you almost miss it. The night teaches in whispers. Even a single misstep can echo for a lifetime. The apprentice watches, absorbing every minute detail. You notice the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers flex against her lap. The older geisha places a reassuring hand on her small frame, guiding without touching, instructing without speaking. You realize that this is the most delicate kind of teaching, learning through observation, through intuition, through silent mimicry. Then, a sudden sound, a soft rustle of silk against floorboards. Candle flames lean toward it, shadows stretching like eager observers. You freeze, heart racing, aware that the night is far from over. The newcomer who just arrived glances toward the sound, expression unreadable. The older geisha's eyes narrow, and for a moment, the room is suspended in tension, so thick you could slice it with the edge of a hairpin. The rustle comes again, this time accompanied by a faint, almost imperceptible voice. I have arrived as instructed. The newcomer's tone is timid, yet carries an urgency that ripples through the room. The older geisha inclines her head ever so slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of the new participant's presence. You sense it immediately. The floating world is not a single unified entity. It is an ecosystem of overlapping loyalties, rivalries, and hidden agendas. Every arrival, every message, every gesture has the potential to change the balance entirely. And tonight, the equilibrium is fragile, taut, and charged with anticipation. The newcomer kneels, presenting a folded scroll to the older geisha. The younger geisha and apprentice watch, hands folded, eyes wide. You can almost feel the weight of expectation pressing down, tangible as the scent of candles and incense mingling in the room. The older geisha accepts the scroll with deliberate care, unfolding it with fingers that seem to move, as if guided by centuries of practice. Inked symbols glint under candlelight, precise, purposeful, and loaded with meaning. You realize this is more than a message. It is a contract, a warning, a map of power invisible to outsiders, but entirely present to those who inhabit the midnight world. The younger geisha traces the characters with her fingertips, reading silently. Her eyes flick toward the older geisha for guidance, then back to the scroll. The apprentice mirrors her, copying gestures without fully understanding, but absorbing every nuance. You can see the education unfolding in real time, the slow, careful ingestion of knowledge, the subtle imprinting of ritual into muscle memory. The older geisha leans toward you, voice hushed but intense. Every night in this house is a lesson in survival, diplomacy, and subtlety. What you witness here is the invisible machinery of the floating world. Remember it, learn it, and never, ever forget it. The candle flames dance, shadows playing across faces, objects, and the scroll. Outside, Kyoto hums quietly, unaware that within these walls, destinies are negotiated in silence, loyalty is tested in shadow, and secrets are currency. The younger geisha places the scroll back in the box with meticulous care, aligning it perfectly with the other documents. The newcomer who brought it bows slightly, acknowledging both her skill and her adherence to protocol. The apprentice watches, wide-eyed, her small hands trembling slightly as she processes the layers of ritual, power, and consequence she is beginning to comprehend. Then, the softest of sounds, a bead rolling across lacquered floor, breaks the fragile silence. Candle flames flicker violently, shadows stretch and twist, and the room tenses. Even the older geisha straightens imperceptibly, signaling that the night is far from finished. You feel the chill of anticipation coil in your chest. This is not a performance. This is education, diplomacy, negotiation, and survival all rolled into one elegant, dangerous, and intoxicating dance. And you, a silent observer, are perched at the edge, experiencing a world few outsiders ever glimpse, let alone understand. The older geisha exhales softly, a controlled release of tension, and whispers, "The night is always longer than it seems." And the lessons, more intricate than they appear, a creak at the sliding door, soft, deliberate, almost imperceptible, alerts everyone. Candle flames lean toward the sound, shadows stretching as if to greet a new participant. And you realize, with a mixture of awe and dread, that the night has another revelation in store, another secret waiting to be woven into the delicate fabric of the floating world. The younger geisha glances at the older woman, eyes reflecting both excitement and apprehension. The apprentice mirrors her, absorbing the unspoken lesson that power, influence, and survival are inseparable in this world after midnight. And you, silent and shadowed, know the night is far from over, and that every heartbeat, every glance, every whispered word matters more than you can possibly imagine. The candlelight dances across lacquered surfaces, the mirror glimmers faintly in the corner, and the room exhales preparing for what comes next. Outside, the city sleeps. Inside, the floating world thrives. And as you watch, breath caught between fear and fascination, You realize that secrets, once revealed, have a life of their own, and that the next revelation might change everything. The room holds its breath. Candle flames flicker, casting trembling shadows across the tatami mats and lacquered trays. Every object, every subtle movement, seems magnified in the quiet. You realize with a thrill, tinged dread, that tonight is not about ritual alone. It is about confrontation. The invisible tension of rivalries that simmer beneath the polished surfaces of the floating world. The older geisha leans toward the younger one, voice low and conspiratorial. Tonight, you see what is rarely admitted: power is contested, even here. Alliances are tested by subtle gestures, whispered words, and the smallest misstep. The younger geisha stiffens, fingers brushing a folded scroll, as if bracing herself for something she cannot yet name. The apprentice mirrors her, eyes wide, pulse visible in the subtle rise and fall of her neck. You notice how the older geisha's hand hovers near a delicate hairpin, half warning, half preparation. Though her body remains calm, composed, unraidable, a soft shuffle interrupts the tension, and all heads turn. From the far corner emerges another geisha, her kimono darker, her eyes sharp, carrying the weight of reputation and silent judgment. She moves with an elegance that seems effortless, yet you sense the calculation behind each step. The air shifts, subtle but undeniable, as if the room itself recognizes the stakes. The older geisha inclines her head slightly, acknowledging the newcomer's presence. So, she murmurs, almost to herself, the night grows richer. The newcomer's gaze sweeps the room, sharp and deliberate. Her eyes land on the younger geisha, and for a heartbeat, the air itself seems to contract. You feel the tension coil tighter, aware that invisible lines of influence are being drawn, tested, and challenged all at once. The older geisha gestures toward the newcomer, voice soft but carrying authority. We have prepared for this. The newcomer bows, acknowledging the deference while maintaining a subtle air of challenge. And yet, she replies, voice calm, deliberate, preparation is only half the battle. You sense the apprentice shrink slightly, instinctively folding her hands tighter in her lap. And you realize that the young one is witnessing the mechanics of conflict, as subtle as a whispered insult, yet potentially devastating. The floating world is not loud, not brash. It is calculated, meticulous, and relentless. The younger geisha shifts, hands adjusting a folded scroll, aligning it perfectly with the others. Every motion is deliberate, a counterbalance, a subtle negotiation in the language of shadows. You notice the faint sheen of sweat on her brow, the almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. And you realize, even the smallest gesture can be weaponized here. The older geisha leans toward you, whispering with a sly edge. Notice how they measure each other. Every tilt of the head, every pause, every tiny movement is information. Outsiders might think this is decorum. It's not. It's war in silk. A faint sound, perhaps the brushing of silk against wood, breaks the silence. The newcomer moves closer, hands folded, eyes still calculating. She reaches toward a small box on the table, adjusting its position ever so slightly. The younger geisha reacts immediately, repositioning an object in response. You realize with a thrill that you are watching diplomacy, strategy, and rivalry enacted entirely without words. A battle conducted in gestures and glances. The older geisha observes silently, letting the exchange unfold, her eyes flicking to you once, a knowing glimmer in her gaze. Watch. Learn. This is how the floating world tests loyalty and skill. The apprentice leans forward, curious despite her trepidation. Her fingers hover above a small cord, unsure whether to intervene or remain still. The older geisha places her hand near the girl, guiding subtly, silently, teaching her the balance between observation and action. Then, the newcomer speaks, voice barely above a whisper yet carrying across the room like a ripple. We must address what has been ignored. The words hang in the air, taut and electric. Candle flames flicker violently, shadows twisting as if alive, reflecting the tension of the moment. The younger geisha swallows, lips pressed together, fingers tightening around the edge of a scroll. Even the older geisha straightens imperceptibly, acknowledging the gravity of the statement. You feel your own pulse quicken. Secrets, rivalries, and history, all converging in a room smaller than your apartment, yet infinitely more dangerous. You understand, with a mix of awe and terror, that this is a night where alliances could fracture, reputations could shatter, and the apprentice could learn her first, brutal lesson in survival. The older geisha exhales, a controlled sound, and murmurs almost to herself. And so the night teaches its sharpest lessons first. The newcomer steps closer to the low table, aligning her body perfectly with the objects arranged upon it. Every movement is calculated, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The younger geisha mirrors her subtly, matching gestures, posture, and eye contact. A silent counterbalance in a contest you can feel but barely comprehend. The apprentice leans forward, mesmerized, trying to memorize every nuance. The tilt of a hand, the subtle shift of a gaze, the exact rhythm of breath. You notice the older geisha's slight nod, an acknowledgement of the girl's attention, an unspoken encouragement that learning comes as much from absorbing tension as from participating. A candle flickers, its light dancing across the mother of pearl inlays on a small mirror. The reflection throws patterns onto the wall that resemble webs, and you realize, with a jolt, that the room itself seems to be part of the lesson, illuminating hidden connections, networks, and rivalries. The newcomer leans forward, voice low, as if confiding a secret into the night. "There are debts owed that you may not yet understand," she says. Her gaze sweeps the room, landing briefly on the younger geisha, then the apprentice. "And some debts," she continues, "cannot be repaid with obedience alone." The older geisha inclines her head, voice measured, almost teasing. "True power," she murmurs, "is not given. It is claimed in silence, in observation, and in knowing when to act, or not act." You feel the apprentice tense, the reality of the words sinking in. The floating world is a place where mistakes are invisible until catastrophic, where loyalty is measured in nuance, and survival depends on subtlety. The newcomer taps a scroll lightly, signaling the younger geisha to respond. She adjusts a small brush, aligns a chord, and positions a tiny ornament, each movement precise and loaded with meaning. The older geisha observes silently, letting the contest unfold without interference. A teacher allowing the lesson to imprint itself on the students. You realize with a mixture of thrill and fear that this is the first confrontation the apprentice has witnessed. The lesson is brutal, silent, and elegant, and you understand why outsiders never fully grasp the floating world. Its battles are invisible, its power hidden in nuance, and its stakes immeasurable. Then, a faint sound at the far corner, a whisper, a shift, a foot sliding across tatami, alerts the room. Candle flames stretch toward it, shadows flickering violently. The older geisha straightens imperceptibly, signaling readiness. The newcomer tilts her head, eyes sharp, and the younger geisha's hands tighten on the objects she adjusts. You feel the room pulse with anticipation, as though every object, every shadow, every breath is holding its own secret. And in that moment, you understand that what comes next will test not only skill and loyalty, but courage, patience, and understanding of the hidden rules that govern the floating world. The older geisha leans toward you, whispering, and now the first truths of the night will be revealed. A shadow moves, faster than expected, and the room tenses. Candlelight wavers. The mirror glints sharply, reflecting something more than light, an omen, a challenge, a secret waiting to unfold. And you, silent observer, feel your pulse match the rhythm of the room itself, caught on the edge of revelation, where loyalty, power, and survival intersect. The shadow at the far corner resolves into a figure, one you recognize only by the glint of a hairpin in the candlelight. The newcomer's eyes sharpen, scanning the room, calculating the weight of every presence. You feel the tension coil tighter, almost visible, stretching between the lacquered trays, the folded scrolls, and the delicate chords. The older geisha leans slightly forward, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the authority of centuries. This is where loyalty and skill meet reality. Observe the subtle dance, the invisible contest of influence. The younger geisha tightens her hands around the brush, aligning the chord with a precision born from training, but tempered by nerves. The apprentice's fingers hover uncertainly, ready to mimic, to react, but unsure of when intervention is permitted. You sense the older geisha's silent instruction: wait, watch, learn. The newcomer places a small mirror on the table, adjusting it slightly. The mother, of pearl inlay, catches the candlelight, reflecting fractured patterns across the walls. It is not decoration, it is a tool, a silent observer, a way of measuring attention, focus, and intention. You realize that even the objects in this room are participants in the contest. A faint shift of silk signals the older geisha's acknowledgement, and the tension between the two newcomers becomes almost tangible. Every breath, every flicker of the eyes, every imperceptible movement carries meaning. The younger geisha adjusts her posture in response, subtly but deliberately, demonstrating comprehension, respect, and readiness. The apprentice swallows hard, realizing that she is witnessing not merely a ritual, but a negotiation of power. One misstep, one misread glance, could tip the balance and carry consequences invisible to outsiders, but devastating to those within. She grips the edge of her kimono, steadying herself against the sudden realization of what survival really means in this world. The newcomer speaks, voice low, deliberate, carrying the weight of experience. There are debts that cannot be ignored. Decisions will be made tonight that affect tomorrow. The older geisha inclines her head slightly, almost imperceptibly. And every choice, every hesitation, every subtle movement will be noted, she murmurs. The floating world is unforgiving to those who do not learn to move with it. The candlelight flickers violently, shadows twisting like living creatures across the tatami mats. You notice the apprentice's eyes widen, pupils reflecting the mirror's fractured light. You can almost feel her pulse, a small drumbeat of fear, anticipation, and fascination. Then the tension snaps, quietly, subtly, like the final thread in a silk cord unraveling. The newcomer shifts a brush, the younger geisha reacts, the apprentice mimics, and suddenly the energy in the room shifts. Alliances, rivalries, and loyalties are tested, revealed not through words but through motion, gaze, and gesture. The older geisha leans back slightly, watching the interplay with the faintest hint of a smile. See. The night reveals everything eventually, she murmurs, voice barely audible over the collective hush. Skill is tested, loyalty is measured, and those who survive learn the rules faster than those who falter. The newcomer tilts her head, eyes narrowing, as if measuring the younger geisha's reaction. A subtle pause, almost imperceptible, and then she gestures toward a small cord, signaling an action that is more symbolic than practical. The younger geisha hesitates, then executes the movement flawlessly. The apprentice mirrors her, and the older geisha leans forward, approving without words. You realize the magnitude of what just occurred. This tiny, almost invisible exchange has confirmed competence, assessed loyalty, and subtly established hierarchy. The floating world functions in these minute gestures, where the slightest error can be catastrophic, and the smallest triumph is quietly noted, often by shadows and mirrors rather than people. The newcomer straightens, voice soft but resonant, cutting through the candlelit hush. Remember this night. The truths revealed here are not for the untrained eye. Observe, adapt, survive. The older geisha inclines her head, her smile faint, conspiratorial, teasing, but there is steel beneath it. And you, she whispers, her eyes meeting yours, are learning faster than most realize. Do not mistake this for safety. You are merely on the edge of understanding. The apprentice exhales slowly, hands resting on her lap, mind racing with comprehension. She understands that survival in this world requires more than obedience. It requires perception, subtlety, and the ability to read invisible cues. The younger geisha adjusts a mirror one last time, reflecting the candlelight across the room. The patterns on the walls twist and fracture, creating an intricate tapestry of light and shadow. The older geisha nods faintly, signaling that the first confrontation of the night has passed. But the lesson has only begun. Outside, the streets of Kyoto remain quiet, lanterns swaying in the gentle night breeze. Inside, the floating world hums with unseen energy, its invisible threads weaving connections, testing alliances, and marking the beginning of new rivalries. You feel the weight of what you have witnessed, knowing that the night is far from over. The older geisha leans toward the apprentice, voice soft, almost tender. This is only the first truth. There are more to come, and each will be harder, subtler, and more dangerous than the last. The candle flames stretch, shadows twisting like silent spectators. The mirror glints sharply one final time, reflecting not just light, but the unspoken promise of secrets still waiting, lessons still unfolding, and tests yet to be faced. You take a slow, steadying breath. The floating world has revealed its first challenge, a confrontation that will echo far beyond this room. and as the older geisha's gaze meets yours, you understand tonight is a beginning, a threshold, and what comes next may determine who survives, and who becomes invisible, swallowed by shadows, or lost entirely. The sliding door creaks again. A distant sound of silk brushing tatami makes every nerve in the room tense. You know without a doubt that the night is not done, that the lessons are far from over, and that every heartbeat, every gesture, every flicker of candlelight carries meaning. And as you sit there, breath caught between fascination and fear, you realize the truth of the floating world's secrecy, loyalty, and subtle power are the currency of survival. And tonight, everyone is paying, whether they realize it or not. The night is thick with the scent of incense, camellia oil, and candle wax, and you can feel it pressing against your senses like a velvet glove over a clenched fist. Outside, the streets of Kyoto are hushed, the occasional lantern swaying gently in the cool night breeze, unaware of the machinations unfolding inside this small, lacquered room. Inside, however, the floating world pulses, alive with unspoken alliances, concealed rivalries, and the subtle arithmetic of power. The apprentice sits quietly, hands folded in her lap, eyes wide but attentive. Her first confrontation is behind her, yet the older geisha leans slightly toward her, as if the night itself has lessons yet to deliver. "Do you feel it?" she whispers. The rhythm of influence. The tug of shadows against silk. You may not see it all yet, but your heart knows. That is your first tool. You glance around the room, noticing the faint glimmer of a mirror propped against the wall, catching fragments of candlelight and scattering them into fractured patterns across the tatami mats. Every movement, every reflection, seems to contain information. You sense that the apprentice is beginning to understand that survival in this world is less about strength or skill, and more about perception. The ability to notice, to anticipate, to maneuver within a web that stretches far beyond her immediate senses. The older geisha rises, moving toward the low table with the grace of someone who has lived 1,000 nights in this ritualized world. She picks up a small brush and a folded scroll, gesturing toward the younger geisha and the apprentice. "Tonight, you will practice discretion, negotiation, and adaptability," she murmurs. "And if you fail, even slightly, the lesson will linger far longer than the pain of error." The apprentice swallows, fingers tightening around the edge of her kimono, yet her eyes gleam with determination. You recognize the moment the first trial is as much a psychological awakening as it is a test of skill. The older geisha places the scroll on the table, opening it to reveal a series of intricate symbols, chords, and diagrams. Each element is a key to understanding hidden connections, loyalties, and unspoken obligations within the floating world. The younger geisha studies it silently, tracing patterns with her fingertips, while the apprentice mirrors her, cautiously copying movements. "You see this?" The older geisha asks softly, leaning close to the apprentice. Each line, each fold, each placement has consequences. A gesture misplaced, a glance misread, a chord misaligned, and even the walls may whisper your errors to the wrong eyes. The apprentice nods, though her mind races. You notice the almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw, the subtle flexing of her fingers, the way her eyes dart to the mirror, measuring reflections, angles, shadows. She is learning faster than she knows, learning that the floating world is not only observed but observed upon. The candle flames flicker, casting elongated, twisting shadows. The older geisha moves among them, adjusting positions, nodding slightly, approving of gestures and shifts that are invisible to anyone untrained in the nocturnal ballet of power and secrecy. Then a soft, deliberate shuffle of silk signals another arrival, a figure whose presence immediately recalibrates the tension in the room. Candlelight leans toward them, shadows stretching to greet the newcomer. The apprentice inhales sharply. You can feel her heartbeat in the subtle rise and fall of her shoulders. This is the moment where theory meets practice, where observation confronts reality, and where the first true test of the night begins. The newcomer kneels at the table, folding a small piece of parchment and placing it precisely beside the mirror. Their eyes flick to the younger geisha, then to the apprentice, assessing, measuring, calculating. "Your skill is noted," they say softly, "but observation alone is not enough. You must act, respond, negotiate." The older geisha inclines her head, a faint smile tracing her lips. And so the lesson begins in earnest. She murmurs, almost conspiratorially. The apprentice rises slowly, hands trembling just enough for the older geisha to notice, though she offers no comment. The younger geisha adjusts a small brush, aligning a chord with meticulous care, demonstrating what the apprentice must now emulate under pressure. You feel the tension in the air, as if every shadow, every flickering candle, every reflection in the mirror has been waiting for this precise moment. The newcomer leans closer to the table, voice soft but carrying authority. Every decision, every movement, every hesitation will ripple outward. They warn. The floating world notices. And it remembers. The apprentice swallows hard, nodding. She picks up a chord, aligning it with one of the delicate ornaments on the low table. Her hands shake slightly, but she follows the subtle cues. The angle of a gaze, the tilt of a head, the almost imperceptible movement of silk. Slowly, deliberately, she executes the maneuver, aware that even a slight misalignment could signal weakness, inattention, or disrespect. The older geisha watches closely, her expression unreadable, though a faint glimmer of approval flickers in her eyes. "Observe," she whispers to you. "Notice how control is maintained through subtlety, and how influence can be claimed without a single raised voice. This is power in its quietest, most dangerous form." The candlelight flickers again, shadows twisting across the room in intricate patterns. The apprentice aligns the final element of the display, hand steady now, breath measured. The newcomer inclines their head, eyes gleaming with approval. The younger geisha releases a barely perceptible sigh, acknowledging the apprentice's success in her first trial. Yet even as the apprentice breathes, realizing she has passed the first hurdle, a new tension emerges. From the far corner of the room, a soft rustle of silk signals another presence, an unexpected observer, someone whose reputation carries weight, and whose silence is a statement in itself. Candle flames lean toward the movement, shadows stretching to accommodate yet another layer of scrutiny. The older geisha leans closer to the apprentice, whispering, "Do not mistake this for the end. In the floating world, every victory is temporary, every lesson incomplete, and every alliance precarious." You notice the apprentice's eyes widen slightly, absorbing the truth in the words. She understands now that the floating world is not static, not forgiving, and not kind to those who grow complacent. Every gesture, every reflection in a mirror, every careful placement of chord or brush is an opportunity to gain favor, or to fail unnoticed until it's too late. The newcomer kneels, voice low and deliberate. "You have learned the first rule: observation is power. But now, action is required. Choose wisely, for mistakes may not be forgivable." The apprentice takes a slow, measured breath, glancing at the mirror, the shadows, the delicate objects that populate the low table. You feel her pulse accelerate, her mind racing through possibilities, strategies, contingencies. This is no longer a lesson in mimicry or patience. This is a trial by subtle fire, a test of intuition, courage, and the ability to navigate invisible currents of influence. The older geisha leans back, watching, her expression serene, yet taut with expectation. "And now," she murmurs conspiratorially, "we see if she truly belongs in the midnight world." The candlelight stretches, shadows twist, and the mirror reflects a fractured tapestry of intent, observation, and anticipation. You realize, with a thrill that curls through your chest, that the apprentice is on the cusp of transformation. Her first true confrontation with the invisible machinery that governs the floating world after midnight. Outside, the city remains calm, unaware of the intricate battles unfolding within these walls. Inside, every heartbeat, every glance, every carefully considered movement carries stakes invisible, but absolute. The apprentice adjusts a chord, aligns a brush, and positions a small ornament with precision born of determination, attention, and a dawning understanding of the delicate, dangerous rhythm of this world. A creak from the sliding door interrupts the fragile equilibrium, drawing every gaze. Candle flames lean, shadows stretching like living things, and the older geisha exhales softly, a measured breath that signals anticipation, caution, and the unspoken truth that the night is far from over. You watch, heart caught between fear and fascination, as the apprentice takes her next, deliberate step into the deep currents of the floating world. And in that moment, you understand something essential. This is a world where mastery is invisible, loyalty is fragile, and every secret, once revealed, becomes both weapon and shield. The soft creak of the sliding door echoes in the room, each footfall a punctuation in the silent drama unfolding. Candle flames flicker violently, shadows twisting across the tatami mats as if alive, almost sentient, reacting to the currents of tension. The apprentice freezes for a heartbeat, breath caught, realizing that every action from this moment onward carries meaning, and every mistake is visible to those who have learned the language of shadows. The newcomer moves closer, eyes sharp, scanning the apprentice's posture, her hands, the delicate alignment of cords and ornaments, on the low table. You feel the invisible weight of judgment, the kind that presses against the spine, a mixture of anticipation, approval, and danger. Now, the older geisha whispers, leaning close to the apprentice, show me not what you have learned, but what you understand. Demonstrate intuition, perception, and decisiveness. The floating world rewards subtlety, but punishes hesitation mercilessly. The apprentice inhales, centering herself. Her hands move slowly, deliberately, adjusting the cords and positioning the ornaments with care. Every motion is measured, almost ritualistic, yet infused with a growing confidence. You notice the smallest details, the angle of her wrist, the tilt of her head, the way her fingers hover before making contact. Each movement is a silent declaration of skill and awareness, a step further into the invisible hierarchy that governs this nocturnal realm. The newcomer nods slightly, eyes narrowing as if to examine not only the apprentice's execution but her intent. Good, they murmur, voice low, almost a caress of approval and warning combined. But perfection alone is insufficient. Observe, anticipate, and adapt. The world watches those who move carefully, and those who falter. The younger geisha steps closer, subtly adjusting the mirror to catch the reflection of a cord that the apprentice had momentarily misaligned. A small, almost imperceptible nod passes between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of competence and mutual recognition. The apprentice's chest rises slightly, a mixture of relief and the dawning comprehension that subtle alliances are as vital as skill itself. A faint rustle from the corner draws attention once more, a reminder that the night is layered, populated not just by people, but by shadows, reflections, and whispered intentions. Candlelight leans toward the movement, flames flickering in a lively dance that mirrors the energy in the room. The older geisha watches the interaction with an unflinching calm, her eyes alight with amusement and calculation, as if she alone knows the rules of the invisible game being played. The apprentice adjusts a chord again, this time with the confidence born of experience. She aligns the brush and ornaments with precision, reading not just the physical layout but the unspoken cues of everyone observing her. The newcomer leans closer, nodding once, approvingly but still maintaining a subtle, unyielding intensity. Notice. The older geisha murmurs conspiratorially to you. How mastery here is silent. There is no applause, no obvious reward. Recognition comes in fleeting glances, in unspoken acknowledgement, in the subtle repositioning of a mirror or a chord. That is power, the quiet, invisible power that governs this world. The apprentice straightens, finally allowing a faint, almost imperceptible smile to touch her lips. You sense her realization. The first trial is more than a test of skill. It is a revelation of the invisible currents that dictate survival, loyalty, and influence. Suddenly, a soft, deliberate shuffle signals another arrival. Candle flames flicker wildly, shadows twisting into long, jagged lines across the room. The older geisha inclines her head slightly, acknowledging the new presence. The night has many teachers, she murmurs, and many lessons. Do not forget this. The newcomer kneels, voice low, deliberate, almost conspiratorial. You have done well, but remember, observation is only the beginning. The floating world does not forgive complacency, and it never ceases its scrutiny. The apprentice exhales slowly, letting the weight of the night settle on her shoulders. She understands now that her journey is only beginning, that each interaction, each gesture, each alignment of chord and ornament is a statement in a silent language whose vocabulary she is only beginning to learn. The older geisha rises, gliding through the candlelit room like a shadow among shadows. Tonight, she murmurs, voice soft but commanding, you have survived the first trial. But survival is only a doorway. The lessons ahead are sharper, subtler, and more dangerous. Remember this feeling: anticipation, awareness, and the thrill of navigating a world where everything is as it seems. And yet, nothing is as it seems. A candlelight dances across lacquered trays, mirrors glint faintly, and shadows stretch and twist, reflecting not only movement but intent, loyalty, and hidden desires. You feel the room itself pulse with energy, alive with secrets, rivalry, and knowledge passed silently from master to apprentice. The apprentice kneels again, hands folded, breath steady, absorbing the weight of the night and the first lessons of true responsibility. The older Geisha places a hand on her shoulder, guiding subtly, not interrupting, not taking over. The floating world will test you endlessly, she whispers, and you will need to be ready for every ripple of consequence. From the corner of the room, the mirror reflects fractured patterns of candlelight across the walls, as if the night itself is showing the apprentice the invisible threads that connect every person, every gesture, every shadow in the floating world. You realize that her education has only just begun, and that each trial is less about objects or movements than about understanding the silent language of influence, power, and survival. The sliding door creaks again, a subtle, ominous sound that hints at another arrival or revelation. Candle flames lean toward it, shadows stretching like sentinels. The older Geisha exhales softly, her eyes flicking to the apprentice, to the newcomer, to you. The night is far from over, she murmurs, and the next lesson will demand more than skill. It will demand courage, perception, and cunning. The apprentice's eyes glimmer in the flickering light, reflecting both fear and determination. You feel her heartbeat in your own chest, a shared pulse of anticipation. Outside, Kyoto remains quiet. Inside, the floating world thrives, revealing, testing, and shaping those who dare to walk its delicate, dangerous path. And as the candlelight dances across the lacquered surfaces, mirrors, and silk, you understand the truth of the midnight world. Survival is not granted, power is not obvious, and mastery is silent, measured in glances, gestures, shadows, and the unspoken knowledge that secrets, once glimpsed, can change everything. The sliding door leans open slowly, another shadow merging with the candlelit tapestry of the room. You hold your breath, knowing the apprentice's first true trial has ended. But the night, as always, has more lessons, more whispers, more dangers waiting just beyond the candlelight. The floating world is alive, patient, and infinitely subtle, and the apprentice is only beginning to understand her place within it. The night arrives heavy and velvet, dense, pressing against the small room like an expectant audience, hushed but eager. Outside, Kyoto's streets are shrouded in mist, lanterns casting pools of golden light that flicker against wet cobblestones. Inside, the floating world pulses with its own secret heartbeat, shadows stretching and curling across the tatami mats, as if the room itself is breathing, watching, waiting. You feel it immediately. Tension, anticipation, and the invisible charge of alliances yet untested, rivalries yet fully revealed. The apprentice sits upright, knees tucked beneath her, hands folded in her lap with a tension that betrays her calm exterior. She has survived the first trial, executed movements with precision, and demonstrated awareness of invisible threads that govern this world. Yet tonight promises more. Tonight, she will confront deception directly, a silent test of wit, perception, and courage. The older Geisha leans close, voice a conspiratorial whisper that barely stirs the air. The floating world is patient. It waits for the knave to stumble and rewards those who anticipate. Watch, and remember, perception is as lethal as any blade. A soft rustle signals the arrival of the first participant. Candle flames lean toward the movement, shadows stretching in long, trembling fingers. The newcomer kneels near the low table, eyes sharp, movements deliberate. Each gesture is calculated, a silent test, and you feel the invisible web of tension tighten with each subtle action. The apprentice swallows hard. Every muscle in her body seems attuned to the room. The scent of camellia oil on silk, the faint tang of ink from folded scrolls, the low, almost imperceptible whisper of movement against tatami. Each detail could carry meaning, each shadow could harbor observation, and each glance might convey warning or approval. The older Geisha gestures subtly, and the apprentice rises, hands moving almost of their own accord. She adjusts a chord here, aligns a brush there, mirrors the nuanced movements of those around her. But this time, there is a challenge embedded in the very air. The newcomer's gaze sharpens, scanning, testing, as if daring the apprentice to misstep. Deception. The older geisha whispers, leaning toward you, her voice low and amused, is the currency of the floating world. And tonight, you will see how debts are paid in silence, gestures, and reflection. The apprentice's pulse quickens. Her first trial of skill is over. This trial of cunning begins. The newcomer slides a small folded piece of paper across the lacquered surface, its presence subtle yet loaded with intent. The younger geisha watches with a flicker of intrigue, mirroring the apprentice's subtle movements, but the attention is divided, layered, like overlapping waves of silk brushing tatami. The apprentice picks up the paper, aware that even the way she handles it will be scrutinized. Her fingers tremble slightly, an honest tremor of anticipation. And you feel it, almost as if the room itself has acknowledged her nervousness. She unfolds the paper carefully, revealing a sequence of symbols and tiny instructions, seemingly simple yet layered with hidden meaning. The candlelight catches the folds, casting fragmented reflections across the walls. Shadows twist into intricate patterns, hinting at possibilities, misdirection, and concealed intent. The newcomer leans back, eyes sharp, lips curved in the faintest suggestion of amusement. Interpret wisely, they murmur, voice low, almost teasing. Every gesture, every alignment of cord or brush, every glance will be observed. Misread the message, and the consequences are invisible but real. The apprentice exhales slowly, centering herself. The room seems to shrink and expand at once, the walls bending in the fractured candlelight, mirrors reflecting not only objects but intention. She arranges the cords, ornaments, and brushes according to the instructions, paying attention to the invisible language-y spacing, alignment, and angle. It is subtle, quiet work, but the stakes are immense. A soft, almost imperceptible shift of silk behind her signals another presence, an observer, hidden in shadow, whose reputation is whispered but feared. Candlelight stretches toward them, shadows clawing across the floor. The older geisha's eyes glimmer, a mischievous and warning spark. Notice how even those unseen influence the game, she whispers. Their power is invisible but absolute. You must account for it. The apprentice adjusts a small ornament, tilts her brush, and subtly shifts a chord. She feels the weight of observation like a physical pressure, almost tangible. The newcomer leans closer, voice a low whisper, words carefully chosen. Subtlety alone is insufficient. Anticipate reactions, weigh loyalties, and predict responses. Deception is a living thing. It adapts. You sense the apprentice's mind racing, calculating not only the instructions but the intentions behind them, the consequences of alignment, and the nuances of observation. It is a delicate dance of intellect, intuition, and nerve. Each movement carries weight, each pause is loaded with meaning. The candlelight flickers violently as the sliding door creaks once more, and another figure enters silently. Shadows lean and stretch, reflecting fragmented patterns across the walls. The older geisha inclines her head, lips curving in that familiar conspiratorial half-smile. And now, she murmurs, the web grows more intricate. Every choice has a counter, every alignment an echo. The apprentice adjusts her posture, drawing in a slow breath. Her fingers hover above a chord, then shift it deliberately. She executes a sequence of movements that seem simple but are laden with layers of calculation. Every gesture communicates understanding, awareness, and subtle control. The newcomer watches with barely concealed scrutiny, while the observer in shadow leans slightly forward, attentive to every micro-movement. A faint whisper, silk brushing tatami, signals the beginning of the next layer of the test. The apprentice's pulse quickens as she realizes that the room itself is part of the challenge. The objects, shadows, reflections, and even the rhythm of candle flames are instruments in a subtle orchestration of evaluation. The older geisha leans close to the apprentice, voice conspiratorial, almost teasing. Notice the unspoken. Predict the unseen. Your mind must move faster than your hands, or the world will claim your hesitation as weakness. The apprentice aligns a chord, mirrors a gesture, tilts a brush, and places an ornament. A tiny nod from the younger geisha signals correct interpretation. A faint glimmer in the older geisha's eyes suggests approval. You realize that mastery in this world is silent, subtle, and invisible to anyone not attuned to its quiet rhythms. Another shadow moves, candlelight flickering across lacquered surfaces. The newcomer leans forward slightly, voice soft yet firm. The night is long, and each action carries consequences. Remember, the floating world rewards cunning, punishes error, and admires the patient. The apprentice straightens, breath steady, mind alert. She begins to anticipate the next sequence, adjusting chords and ornaments with fluid precision. Mirrors reflect not just light, but hidden intent. Shadows shift to mark observation, attention, and judgment. You feel the tension stretch taut, like a bowstring ready to release. Then, a subtle misalignment in a chord. The apprentice's eyes widen for a fraction of a second, but she corrects it immediately, fingers steady, mind calm. The room shifts imperceptibly, tension easing as she demonstrates adaptability, awareness, and composure under pressure. The older geisha murmurs softly, almost approvingly, "Well done. You are learning that errors are inevitable, but recovery defines skill." The sliding door creaks again. Candle flames stretch toward it, shadows twist and elongate. You realize the night is not over. The apprentice's first test of cunning is complete, but the lessons continue, stretching deeper into the layers of deception, observation, and silent influence that govern this world. The older geisha leans close to you, conspiratorial, amused. "Remember this moment," she whispers. "Observe how fear, calculation, and subtlety intermingle. The floating world has tested her once. The night will test her again, and again, until she understands that mastery is invisible, alliances are fragile, and every secret is both a weapon and a shield." The apprentice kneels, hands folded, eyes gleaming in the flickering candlelight. Shadows dance across the tatami, mirrors glint sharply. Outside, the city slumbers unaware. Inside, the floating world thrives quiet, intricate, and infinitely subtle. And as the night stretches onward, you realize that every heartbeat, every gesture, every shadow is a lesson in survival, perception, and power, and the apprentice has only just begun to navigate its delicate, dangerous currents. The candlelight shivers, casting fractured reflections across lacquered trays and folded scrolls. The sliding door shifts slightly, a shadow merging with the intricate tapestry of the room. You inhale slowly, heart thrumming with anticipation. The apprentice's journey continues, deeper into a world where observation, cunning, and courage define the difference between survival and invisibility. And somewhere in the quiet, conspiratorial folds of the midnight world, the older geisha smiles knowingly. The apprentice has passed her first trials, but the night is far from over, and the secrets waiting in the shadows are more dangerous, subtle, and intoxicating than she has yet imagined. The room is quiet, yet alive, like a body at rest, but brimming with unseen energy. Candlelight dances across the polished surfaces, reflecting in mirrors, glinting off lacquered trays, and tracing fractured patterns across tatami mats. The apprentice kneels in the center, chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths, the weight of the previous trial still pressing against her shoulders. She has begun to understand the rhythm of the floating world, the invisible currents of observation, loyalty, and subtle power, but tonight promises an entirely new revelation. A faint creak of the sliding door signals the arrival of someone older, someone whose presence seems to bend the room's energy toward quiet vigilance. The newcomer's footsteps are soft, deliberate, a measured intrusion that carries authority without words. Candle flames lean toward her, shadows stretching like silent attendants. The older geisha tilts her head in acknowledgement, a conspiratorial glint in her eyes. She comes bearing truths few are allowed to touch. She murmurs, almost to you. And tonight, you will see how the apprentice begins to navigate knowledge forbidden to the faint of heart. The apprentice swallows, awareness sharpening with each subtle shift of silk or glance of shadow. There is something almost tangible in the air, a promise of revelations, a hint of danger, and the unmistakable thrill of entering realms of the floating world previously invisible to her. The newcomer kneels gracefully, unfolding a small, delicate scroll and placing it on the table with an elegance that demands attention. Its surface is covered in tiny, intricate symbols, diagrams, and annotations, a visual language that communicates far more than simple instructions. The apprentice leans forward, fascinated and cautious, realizing that the knowledge contained here is rarely revealed outside the most trusted circles. This, the older geisha murmurs, voice conspiratorial, is the network you have glimpsed, but never truly understood. Here secrets move invisibly, alliances form in whispers, and power is measured by subtlety rather than volume. Observe carefully. Misinterpretation has consequences. The apprentice traces a finger along a chord depicted in the diagrams, imagining its real-life counterpart on the low table before her. Each line, each fold, each symbol carries significance far beyond its simple appearance. She recognizes the metaphor embedded within the physical layout. Shadows, mirrors, and the positioning of objects are not merely decorative. They are messages, warnings, and silent affirmations of hierarchy and loyalty. The older geisha leans closer, voice soft but intense. The floating world is not merely a stage, it is a map of influence, a living organism. Every movement, every glance, every adjustment in posture ripples through the web. What you are about to see is a demonstration of its pulse. The candle flames flicker violently, as if acknowledging the gravity of the lesson. Shadows stretch and intertwine, creating shapes that suggest figures, movements, and alliances invisible to the untrained eye. The apprentice's pulse quickens. She senses that tonight she will not only observe, but also participate in the delicate negotiation of secrets, testing her comprehension and courage simultaneously. A soft shuffle signals another presence. From the far corner, a geisha of considerable reputation emerges, her kimono whispering across the tatami like wind through bamboo. She carries a small, lacquered box, the contents invisible yet promising revelation. The apprentice's breath catches. The older geisha tilts her head slightly, lips curving in amusement. Patience and perception, always, she whispers. The unprepared falter when faced with forbidden insight. Observe, but do not panic. The newcomer opens the box, revealing an assortment of miniature charms, cords, and folded slips of parchment, each meticulously annotated. The symbols echo the diagrams in the scroll, connecting the apprentice's previous lessons to a broader, hidden network of influence. The apprentice's eyes widen, understanding dawning. The floating world extends far beyond this room, through hidden corridors, whispered conversations, and secret alliances. The older geisha leans close again, conspiratorial, almost teasing. These objects, she murmurs, are keys, not to doors but to understanding. Every symbol, every placement, every reflection in a mirror tells a story, and each story is a thread in a tapestry you are only beginning to comprehend. The apprentice begins to manipulate a cord, mirroring the arrangements depicted in the diagrams. Candlelight glints off lacquer, mirrors, and ornaments, creating fractured reflections that seem almost alive. Shadows stretch and twist, mirroring movement, hinting at alliances and rivalries yet unseen. The newcomer nods once, subtle approval in the tilt of her head. Then a faint rustle, silk against tatami, signals another observer. Candle flames stretch, shadows elongating to encompass the movement. The older geisha's eyes glint knowingly. Observe the unseen. Knowledge travels silently. The consequences of ignoring what lurks in shadow are never forgiving. The apprentice's hands move with increasing confidence, adjusting cords, placing ornaments, and aligning mirrors to match the intricate diagrams. Each placement, each adjustment, is a calculated act of communication, a demonstration of comprehension, and an assertion of her growing competence within the midnight hierarchy. The newcomer leans closer, voice soft but deliberate. "Understand this?" she says. "The floating world is a network, a living organism of influence. Secrets are currency, and discretion is survival. To navigate it successfully, you must anticipate actions, predict reactions, and never reveal more than necessary." The apprentice nods, absorbing each word, each gesture, each nuance. Candlelight flickers across her features, highlighting determination, awareness, and the thrill of discovery. Shadows curl around the edges of the room, silently observing, reflecting, and recording the apprentice's every action. A small folded slip of parchment is handed to her. She opens it carefully, revealing instructions layered with subtle threats, hidden suggestions, and encoded advice. The older geisha leans in, whispering conspiratorially, "Every line has meaning, every symbol has intent. Misinterpretation carries consequences invisible but absolute. Trust your observation, but question everything." The apprentice studies the instructions, adjusting the cords and mirrors to match the delicate framework laid out before her. Candlelight flickers against lacquered surfaces, shadows twisting in response to her careful movements. You sense the intensity of focus, the thrill of discovery, and the subtle tension that underscores each action. Suddenly, the sliding door creaks. A new figure emerges, partially hidden in shadows, carrying a small tray with additional charms and folded instructions. Candle flames lean toward the movement, shadows stretching in acknowledgement. The older geisha tilts her head slightly, lips curving with amusement. "The night is patient," she murmurs. "The web of influence is vast, and each participant is a thread in a tapestry of secrets, alliances, and subtle power." The apprentice adjusts a cord, tilts a brush, and places an ornament with precision, signaling understanding, awareness, and cautious mastery. Each movement communicates competence to those watching, though silently, invisibly, and subtly. The newcomer nods once, approvingly but without fanfare. "You have begun to understand the network," the older geisha whispers. "But comprehension alone is insufficient. Action will define your survival. Anticipation, discretion, and cunning are your true tools. Remember, these secrets are alive. They shift, they adapt, they bite." The apprentice straightens, eyes gleaming in candlelight, pulse steady but alert. She recognizes that her first true encounter with forbidden knowledge has begun, and the stakes are higher than she imagined. Shadows twist across the room, mirrors glint with fragmented reflections, and candle flames dance in acknowledgement of her growing awareness. The sliding door shifts slightly, a shadow merging with the intricate tapestry of the room. The older geisha smiles knowingly. "The night has many lessons," she murmurs, "and every secret revealed carries weight, responsibility, and danger." The apprentice has begun to understand her place, but the web is vast, and the currents are treacherous. The apprentice kneels, hands folded, awareness sharp, and eyes glinting with determination. The floating world continues around her, invisible, subtle, alive. And as candlelight flickers across lacquered trays, mirrors, and ornaments, you understand the truth. Knowledge is power, discretion is survival, and the apprentice's journey has only just begun. Outside, Kyoto slumbers, unaware. Inside, the midnight network pulses with secrets, alliances, and unseen influence. The night stretches onward, infinite, patient, and conspiratorial, promising lessons far deeper, more intricate, and more dangerous than the apprentice has yet imagined. And somewhere in the shadows, the older geisha smiles, knowing that the apprentice is stepping fully into the currents of a world, where every secret is a weapon, every reflection a warning, and every movement a test. The night presses against the walls like a living thing, dense with mist drifting in from Kyoto's silent streets, carrying the faint aroma of rain on stone and the subtle tang of incense from distant shrines. Inside, the room is warmer, perfumed with camellia oil and the delicate hint of tea, yet taut with anticipation. Candle flames flicker against lacquered surfaces, casting fragmented reflections in the mirrors scattered about the tatami. Shadows twist and stretch like living specters, awaiting the unfolding of events with a patience born of centuries. The apprentice kneels in the center of the room, hands folded neatly, breath slow and measured, but her eyes betray the quickened pulse of her mind. She has navigated observation, subtlety, and forbidden knowledge. She has aligned chords and ornaments with the precision of someone learning to read a silent language. But tonight is different. Tonight she will face rivals directly. A collision of ambition, cunning, and invisible power that threatens to test every lesson she has learned. A faint creak announces the first rival's arrival. Candlelight leans toward the movement, shadows elongating like dark sentinels. The geisha steps in, kimono whispering across tatami with deliberate grace, eyes sharp, smile faintly mocking. The older geisha watches silently, expression unreadable, as if the room itself is holding its breath. "Observe," she whispers conspiratorially to you. "The dance is about to begin." Rivalry is a test of subtlety, courage, and perception. Do not underestimate its silent power. The apprentice inhales, adjusting her posture, palms pressing lightly against her thighs. Every detail is magnified, the faint creak of silk under tension, the rustle of moving ornaments, the glint of mirrors catching candlelight at precise angles. She is aware, for the first time, that confrontation in the floating world is rarely loud or dramatic. It is quiet, deliberate, and lethal in its subtlety. The rival geisha kneels a few feet away, eyes sweeping the room with the practiced calculation of someone who has studied power as a living organism. She reaches for a chord, adjusting it in a subtle, almost imperceptible manner, a silent assertion of influence and authority. The apprentice notices immediately, instinctively countering with a delicate realignment of her own cords and ornaments. Shadows twist, mirrors reflect fractured light, and you sense the tension pressing against the walls like living pressure. You understand, the older geisha murmurs softly, leaning toward the apprentice, that this is not a test of skill alone. Observation, anticipation, and subtle maneuvering define the outcome. One misstep, and the consequences are invisible but profound. The apprentice straightens, tilting her head slightly, reading the silent cues embedded in every movement of her rival. Each tilt of silk, each placement of cord, each adjustment of ornament is a calculated statement, a claim of authority within this quiet, hidden world. Candle flames flicker, shadows twist, and you feel the invisible tug of a complex dance, choreographed in silence and perception. A soft rustle signals a second rival. Candlelight stretches toward the newcomer, shadows elongating and intertwining with those already present. The older geisha tilts her head in acknowledgement, lips curved in a faint, conspiratorial smile. Now the network begins to react, she whispers. Rivalries amplify, alliances are tested, and subtle influence becomes the currency of survival. The apprentice senses the stakes rising. Each cord, each brush, each ornament is no longer merely a test of precision. It is a declaration of intent, a signal to allies, a subtle challenge to rivals. Mirrors multiply the reflections, showing not just the room, but the complex web of observation, influence, and potential missteps. The first rival leans slightly, a subtle but deliberate gesture, eyes glinting in candlelight. The apprentice responds instinctively, shifting a cord to counterbalance the implied assertion. Shadows stretch, dancing across lacquered trays and mirrors, mirroring the invisible conflict unfolding. The second rival observes carefully, adjusting a small ornament with calculated subtlety, demonstrating that influence in the floating world is cumulative, layered, and quietly assertive. The older geisha leans in again, conspiratorial, amused. Notice how the floating world communicates without words. Observation is currency, silence is power, and subtlety is lethal. Watch closely. Learn. The apprentice's pulse quickens. She adjusts another cord, aligns an ornament, and tilts a brush. Each action deliberate, precise, and loaded with significance. Candlelight glints off lacquered surfaces, mirrors reflect fragmented images, and shadows twist in acknowledgement of her growing confidence and awareness. You can feel the invisible tension stretching taut, like a bowstring waiting to release. Then, a soft, almost imperceptible misstep. One of the rivals shifts a cord too boldly, signaling impatience, overreach, or miscalculation. The apprentice notices immediately. She counters subtly, adjusting a nearby ornament, tilting a brush, and realigning the cord to restore equilibrium. The first rival's eyes flicker with recognition, understanding that her subtle assertion has been observed and neutralized. The second rival watches closely, calculating her own response. You see, the older geisha murmurs, voice low, almost teasing. Even the most confident can falter when they forget the rules of subtlety, perception, and restraint. Never underestimate the power of quiet correction. The rival geisha leans forward slightly, eyes narrowing, fingers hovering over a cord. Candlelight stretches and flickers, shadows twisting like silent witnesses. The apprentice mirrors her movements with precision, maintaining balance, observing intention, and countering silently. Each gesture is a negotiation, a claim of competence, a declaration that she belongs in this intricate midnight world. A soft shuffle signals another participant entering from the sliding door. Candle flames lean, shadows elongate, and the older geisha's eyes glimmer knowingly. The network expands, she whispers. Influence shifts, rivalries intensify, and the apprentice must now navigate more than skill. She must navigate perception, subtle alliances, and silent hierarchies. The apprentice breathes steadily, adjusting a cord, tilting a brush, and aligning ornaments with deliberate care. Mirrors catch reflections from multiple angles. Shadows twist across the floor in intricate patterns, and you sense the invisible conversation unfolding: rivalry, observation, subtle assertion, and silent acknowledgement. The first rival glances toward the second, then back at the apprentice. A silent communication passes between them, delicate, almost imperceptible, yet loaded with intent. The apprentice senses it immediately, adjusting her movements to counterbalance, maintain influence, and signal her awareness. Candlelight flickers across lacquered trays, mirrors, and folded scrolls, reflecting her deliberate control of space, perception, and interaction. The older geisha leans closer, conspiratorial, almost teasing. Notice how alliances are tested, influence is measured, and mastery is subtle. The apprentice is learning that confrontation in the floating world is rarely loud. It is quiet, precise, and infinitely complex. The second rival shifts again, a deliberate gesture signaling challenge. The apprentice responds with grace, precision, and awareness. Shadows stretch, mirrors multiply reflections, and candlelight dances, illuminating every subtle movement. The room is alive with silent negotiation, invisible hierarchies, and calculated assertion. Then, a small misalignment in one of the chords. The apprentice notices instantly, correcting it with precision and subtlety. The rivals exchange barely perceptible glances, acknowledging her growing competence, while the older geisha's eyes glint with quiet approval. Recovery defines skill, she whispers. Adaptation defines mastery. The sliding door creaks once more, another observer entering silently. Candle flames flicker, shadows stretch, and the tension rises imperceptibly. The apprentice straightens, pulse steady, eyes gleaming with determination. She has navigated observation, forbidden knowledge, and now direct rivalry. The floating world watches, silent, patient, infinitely subtle, and the apprentice is beginning to understand its language. Finally, the rivals kneel back, acknowledging, silently and carefully, her competence. Mirrors reflect fractured images, shadows twist across the floor, and candlelight glimmers off lacquered trays and ornaments. The older geisha leans back, conspiratorial, amused. The apprentice has faced her first real confrontation, she murmurs, and survived. But remember, every victory in this world is temporary, every lesson incomplete, and every alliance fragile. The apprentice kneels, hands folded, breath steady, eyes glinting in candlelight. Shadows stretch and twist across the tatami. Mirrors reflect fractured reflections. Candle flames flicker in acknowledgement of her growing mastery. Outside, Kyoto slumbers unaware. Inside, the floating world thrives, quiet, intricate, and infinitely subtle. And somewhere in the shadows, the older geisha smiles knowingly, lips curving in amusement. The apprentice has passed her first major confrontation. But the night continues, and the currents of influence, deception, and subtle rivalry will only grow more dangerous, more intricate, and more intoxicating with every passing moment. The night feels impossibly still, as if Kyoto itself is holding its breath. Mist drifts in from the streets, curling along cobblestones, carrying the faint scent of rain, incense, and roasted chestnuts from distant stalls. Inside the room, the floating world pulses with quiet anticipation. Candle flames dancing and flickering across lacquered surfaces, mirrors catching fractured reflections, and shadows stretching like living witnesses. Tonight is the night, the culmination of trials, rivalries, knowledge, and subtle power. The apprentice feels it in every fiber of her being, the weight of expectation, the thrill of mastery, and the invisible gaze of those who watch her. She kneels at the center of the tatami, palms resting lightly on her thighs, breathing deliberately, heart steady but quickened. Every trial she has faced, the silent observations, the alignment of chords, the forbidden knowledge, the rivalries and subtle assertions, has led to this precise moment. Candlelight flickers across her features, highlighting determination, awareness, and the thrill of anticipation. Shadows lean and twist in acknowledgement, mirrors reflecting fractured, overlapping images of her poised form. The older geisha steps forward, moving with fluid grace, her eyes alight with amusement and expectation. Tonight, she murmurs conspiratorially, you will test everything you have learned. Observation, subtlety, cunning, knowledge, and resilience will be measured, not in public, not with applause, but in the silent currents of influence that govern this world. Are you prepared to navigate the final labyrinth? The apprentice inclines her head slightly, breath steady, understanding the weight of the moment. She is ready, or at least, as ready as one can be in a world defined by hidden power and subtle threat. Candlelight flickers across the lacquered trays, mirrors, and ornaments, emphasizing the intricate dance of preparation, anticipation, and awareness. A soft creak of the sliding door signals the arrival of multiple observers, rivals, allies, and those whose presence is felt rather than acknowledged. Candle flames stretch toward the new arrivals, shadows twisting and intertwining across tatami, creating a dynamic tapestry of observation, judgment, and expectation. The apprentice senses the invisible threads of power stretching taut, connecting her to everyone in the room, and realizes that tonight she must navigate them all without error. The first task is subtle yet loaded with significance: the alignment of chords, ornaments, and mirrors according to a sequence that is part instruction, part test, and part silent negotiation of influence. The apprentice moves with deliberate care, fingers brushing silk and lacquer, tilting a brush here, shifting a chord there. Every motion communicates awareness, competence, and intent. Candlelight glints across lacquer, mirrors multiply reflections, and shadows twist in acknowledgement. A rival leans forward slightly, eyes sharp, fingers hovering over a chord as if to assert influence. The apprentice notices instantly, subtly countering with a precise adjustment of her own, signaling awareness and control. The older geisha watches silently, lips curved in amusement, eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a teacher observing the culmination of lessons meticulously learned. "You understand," she murmurs conspiratorially. "That mastery is invisible. Recognition comes not with applause, but in the subtle shifts of awareness, acknowledgement, and silent equilibrium. Tonight, every gesture counts, and every error, even minor, is magnified." The apprentice continues, each movement measured, deliberate, and layered with meaning. Mirrors reflect not just objects but intention, shadows twist to reveal alliances and rivalries, observation and subtle challenge. Candlelight flickers across the room, illuminating fragments of insight, fragments of influence, and fragments of power that are invisible to anyone not attuned to the floating world. Then comes the second task, a test of perception and anticipation. Hidden messages embedded in small ornaments, coded instructions folded into mirrors, and subtle alignments of chords require not just observation, but interpretation, inference, and calculation. The apprentice leans closer, reading symbols, adjusting positions, and intuitively anticipating the reactions of observers and rivals alike. The air in the room feels charged, alive, as if the shadows themselves are breathing, reacting to every subtle action. A rival shifts abruptly, a deliberate assertion of influence, testing the apprentice's ability to respond without faltering. Candle flames stretch toward the movement, shadows twisting with increasing complexity. The apprentice counters subtly, realigning a chord, tilting a brush, and adjusting an ornament. Mirrors reflect fragmented images, emphasizing her growing mastery of perception, anticipation, and subtle negotiation. "You see?" The older geisha whispers, leaning close, conspiratorial and amused. "Errors are inevitable. Recovery is mastery. Anticipation is survival. Tonight, every decision matters. No gesture is trivial, no reflection meaningless." The third test is the most challenging. An invisible negotiation among allies and rivals. Words are sparse, gestures deliberate, glances loaded with hidden meaning. The apprentice must assert influence without overt action, negotiate alliances without acknowledgement, and maintain equilibrium in a room buzzing with invisible tension. Candlelight flickers, shadows twist, and mirrors multiply the subtle cues, creating a layered, silent battlefield of awareness, strategy, and perception. A small slip, a chord misaligned, a brush slightly tilted, catches the attention of a rival. But the apprentice recovers with finesse, subtly correcting the placement while signaling confidence and competence. Candlelight dances across lacquer, mirrors, and ornaments, highlighting the fluidity of her movements and the precision of her judgment. The older geisha watches silently, lips curved in approval. The final task arrives in the form of a folded slip of parchment, passed quietly by an unseen hand. The instructions are layered with subtle threats, hidden suggestions, and encoded advice. The apprentice unfolds it carefully, understanding that misinterpretation could disrupt equilibrium, undermine alliances, and reveal weaknesses. Shadows twist across the tatami, mirrors reflect fractured, multiplying images, and candlelight shimmers across lacquered surfaces, as if the room itself is watching. The apprentice studies the instructions, synthesizing knowledge from every previous trial. She adjusts chords, aligns ornaments, tilts brushes, and mirrors subtle gestures observed earlier. Every motion is precise, intentional, and loaded with multiple layers of meaning. Candlelight glints off lacquer. Mirrors reflect fragmented images, and shadows twist and curl in acknowledgement of her growing mastery. A rival leans forward, a subtle challenge embedded in her posture, eyes glinting in candlelight. The apprentice anticipates, responding with grace, precision, and subtlety. Mirrors multiply the reflections of her movements, shadows stretch to echo her adjustments, and candle flames flicker in recognition. The room is alive with invisible currents of observation, influence, and subtle negotiation, all converging on her final test. Finally, the older geisha rises, voice soft, conspiratorial, and approving. You have demonstrated skill, perception, cunning, and courage. You have observed, anticipated, and navigated the currents of influence. You have faced rivals, mastered forbidden knowledge, and survived the trials of the midnight world. Remember, this mastery is silent, alliances are fragile, and the world beyond the candlelight is infinite, subtle, and endlessly challenging. The apprentice kneels, hands folded, chest rising and falling with measured breaths. Mirrors reflect fractured images, shadows stretch and twist, and candlelight dances across lacquered surfaces. Outside, Kyoto slumbers, oblivious to the invisible drama unfolding within. Inside, the floating world thrives, complex, intricate, alive, and the apprentice has earned her place within it. And somewhere in the shadows, the older geisha smiles knowingly. The apprentice has completed her journey through observation, cunning, and subtle mastery, yet the night stretches onward, infinite in its lessons, endless in its subtle dangers, and quietly waiting for the next step in the dance of influence and perception. The apprentice rises slowly, aware, confident, and infinitely alert. Candlelight glints off mirrors, ornaments, and lacquered trays, casting fractured reflections across the room. Shadows lean and twist, acknowledging her emergence as someone who has learned the language of the midnight world. Kyoto remains quiet outside, but inside, the floating world pulses with energy, secret knowledge, subtle rivalries, and invisible influence. The apprentice has survived, adapted, and mastered her first full journey through this nocturnal realm. The night, patient, conspiratorial, and infinitely subtle, has revealed its secrets to her, and she has learned to navigate them with grace, awareness, and quiet mastery. And as candle flames flicker, mirrors multiply reflections, and shadows stretch across tatami mats, you understand the truth of the floating world's survival is invisible, mastery is subtle, and every secret is a step in a dance that never truly ends. The apprentice kneels one last time, breath steady, eyes glinting with awareness, and you realize that though this chapter closes, the floating world will continue, patient, silent, and infinitely intricate. She has passed her ultimate test, but the night, as always, whispers that the lessons are never over, the currents never cease, and the dance of observation, influence and subtle power continues, eternal and alive.